I'm seeking the death penalty. It's in my best interest, basically, because it's a comfort. The sooner I can fetch myself a new body and come back again.
We, the jury, having heretofore found the defendant, Lisa Jo Dykes, guilty of the offense of murder as charged in the indictment.
This sentence has done nothing except cause our family more pain and more grief.
Justice would be for you to come with me for about 5 minutes. Burn in hell.
54 life-shattering sentences. 54 moments that stunned the courtroom. Some begged, some laughed, some never spoke again. You'll see reactions so disturbing even the judges couldn't hide their shock. And by the end, you'll be asking yourself, what sentence is enough for pure evil? Stay with me, because number 37, it left the entire courtroom in silence. Let's begin.
Portrayal that's been given about us.
The media has so far portrayed us totally like we are not. We're just a mother and son.
Sante Kimes, known as the Dragon Lady, was a notorious figure in the world of crime. Born in 1934, she led a criminal life filled with theft, fraud, arson, and ultimately, murder. Alongside her son, Kenneth Kimes Jr., she was involved in a series of heinous crimes that spanned many years. Their most notorious crime was the murder of Irene Silverman, a socialite from New York City, but their criminal activities didn't stop there. Sante's journey started with minor crimes and escalated to serious offenses. Sante used her charm and manipulation to convince people to assist her in her illegal activities, including her son, Kenneth Jr. Together, they were responsible for several murders. The turning point in their criminal lives came when Kenneth Jr. confessed to multiple murders. After years of dodging authorities, their web of lies began to fall apart. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies connected them to various crimes, including the murder of David Kasdan, another victim whose death was also orchestrated by Sante. Kenneth Jr. eventually reached a plea deal, agreeing to testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Their trial for the murder of Silverman revealed the full extent of their crimes, and both were convicted of multiple charges, including murder and conspiracy.
You were sharing the apartment with your mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In 2000, Sante and Kenneth Jr. were sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Irene Silverman, as well as other crimes. Sante was sentenced to life without parole, plus 125 years, while Kenneth Jr. received a similar sentence. The trial brought to light not just the murder of Silverman, but also their involvement in other heinous acts like forgery, robbery, and arson. Despite their conviction, Sante continued to deny her involvement, blaming the authorities for framing her. She spent her remaining years in prison, where she died in 2014.
Trust me, it can happen to you. It can happen to your mother. It could happen to your son. We have done nothing wrong. The police overreacted. They are framing us.
The case of Sante and Kenneth Kimes is both chilling and heartbreaking. The sheer cruelty of their actions, particularly the way they manipulated those around them, left a lasting impact on the families of their victims. For many, it's hard to understand how a mother could be so involved in her son's crimes, turning him into a murderer. The story of Sante Kimes is a tragic reminder of how greed and manipulation can destroy lives, and how the pursuit of wealth can lead to the loss of humanity.
Funny, generous, bright red hair, and a personality to match. She really was awfully cute.
Kimes' story reveals how a mother-son duo can do horrific acts. However, our next case takes us to a quiet neighborhood where a shocking murder shattered a community's trust.
From Rentham Street in Dorchester, of Miss Galloway leaving on the morning of the 29th at approximately 9 a.m. with a can of bleach.
In 2017, a quiet neighborhood in Needham, Massachusetts became the backdrop for a horrifying crime. 51-year-old Tammy Galloway was convicted for the murder of her 81-year-old neighbor, Laura Shifrina. The murder occurred in Shifrina's apartment, and the details of the case were both tragic and shocking. On May 28, 2017, Laura Shifrina was last seen alive, going about her daily life as a retired scientist. However, just days later, her daughter discovered her body in her Linden Street apartment. Shifrina had not shown up for an event that evening, raising alarm among her family and friends. As authorities investigated, they discovered that Shifrina's apartment had been ransacked. Items like her car, wallet, cell phone, and jewelry were all gone. It seemed clear that something sinister had taken place.
The jury says there is enough evidence now to move forward with the case against a woman who's accused of killing her elderly neighbor in Needham.
The investigation uncovered a chilling series of clues. Shafrina's 2011 red Ford Fiesta was found abandoned with the keys still in the ignition, but the interior reeked of bleach. Surveillance footage from May 29th showed Galloway and a relative near the car, holding a bottle of bleach, suggesting a desperate attempt to cover up the crime. It was then that the horrifying truth came to light. Galloway had brutally stabbed Shafrina to death in her apartment, likely in a robbery gone wrong. Driven by greed, she stole Shafrina's cash, jewelry, and car, hoping to get her hands on the $3,000 Shafrina had saved for a dental procedure.
Police investigating a death of an 81-year-old woman found inside her apartment with what's being called sharp trauma. Authorities are investigating this as if it is a homicide.
After a tense trial, Tammy Galloway was found guilty of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and larceny. The case culminated in an emotional sentencing hearing where Shafrina's daughter spoke out. Galloway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
During her sentencing today, Tammy Galloway apologized to the daughter and grandsons who stole money from her and then stole her car.
The case sent shockwaves through the community. The realization that someone from their neighborhood was capable of such a ruthless act was deeply unsettling. The anguish of losing a loved one in such a violent manner extended beyond Shafrina's family, leaving the entire town shaken. As for Galloway, her crimes have ensured that she will spend the rest of her life behind bars, forever marked by her unforgivable actions.
A former scientist.
Everyone in this community has been on the edge of their seat until the police had apprehended whoever this... So happy. I'm happy now.
The murder of Laura was a senseless act of greed. The next case isn't just about murder. It's about cruelty so extreme, it left an entire state horrified.
Now, the second disappointment was the love letters. The accused person discovered that the disease was still keeping many years after he broke up with the former girlfriends.
In 2015, Ruth Kamande's life changed forever. She was arrested and charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Fareed Mohammed. Ruth stabbed Fareed 25 times during a violent argument, and the case shocked the entire nation. In 2015, Ruth Kamande and her boyfriend, Fareed Mohammed, got into a heated, tragic argument. It all started when Ruth found a small yellow card from the AIDS control program in Fareed's room, revealing something he had kept from her. When she asked him about it, the conversation grew tense. Fareed became upset and told Ruth that he would rather harm both of them than let anyone know his secret. The situation quickly turned dangerous, and Ruth felt scared for her life. They fought for control in the middle of the struggle, and a kitchen knife fell between them. Desperate to protect herself, Ruth acted in fear and overpowered Fareed during the chaos. The tragic incident ended with Fareed losing his life. Police quickly launched an investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, witness testimonies, and Ruth's account. As they pieced together the events of the violent altercation, Ruth was arrested shortly after. In court, she claimed she had acted in self-defense.
That the accused committed the offense and had acted on purpose. Kamande, who was later crowned Miss Langata Women's Prison, had appealed the sentence.
In 2018, Ruth Kamande's life reached a heartbreaking turning point. She stood before the court, facing the consequences of her actions. Despite sharing her story and explaining that she acted in self-defense during a moment of fear and danger, the judge found her guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced the sentence: death. Although Ruth gives no reaction at the time of the sentence announcement.
With the clear intention to cause him pain, suffering, and death, and I've taken into account, I want young people to know that it is not cool to kill your boyfriend or girlfriend.
The decision sparked a wave of public debate. Some people felt sympathy for Ruth, believing she had acted to protect herself from harm. Others saw her actions differently and felt justice had been served. The case became widely discussed, with many questioning how the justice system should handle situations involving household conflicts and self-defense. After further review, Ruth's sentence was reduced from death to life imprisonment. Although she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, her story was not over. The experience marked the darkest chapter of her life, but it also became the beginning of a new path, one where she sought to grow, learn, and find a new purpose, even from within prison walls. Ruth's story didn't end there. While serving her sentence at Community Maximum Prison, she found a new path. She enrolled in law studies through a program by Justice Defenders, an organization that helps inmates and communities gain legal knowledge. In 2024, Ruth graduated with a law degree from the University of London. She shared her achievement with other inmates and wardens during a special ceremony, saying, "We're not only here to celebrate graduates, but people who have transformed and proved that something good can come out of prisons." The resolution of Ruth's story is bittersweet. She remains behind bars, serving a life sentence. She now uses her education to help fellow inmates navigate the justice system. Ruth has also appealed her case to the Supreme Court, hoping for a chance to tell her side of the story again, this time with the knowledge of the law on her side. Her journey brings a mix of emotions, sadness for a life lost, but also hope that even in darkness, people can find redemption and a new purpose. Ruth's tragic yet complex case left the world in turmoil. Our next case reveals how someone can be labeled a serial killer and spend years fighting to prove their innocence.
In corso, alla luce anche delle motivazioni della Suprema Corte di Cassazione, e quindi esprimiamo una soddisfazione che è di tipo professionale e processuale.
Daniela Poggiali was an Italian nurse accused of killing 38 of her patients. The case stirred a lot of controversy and shocked many. However, in 2021, after a thorough reanalysis of the hospital's mortality data, it was found that the statistics used to charge her were flawed. This led to Daniela's acquittal and eventual freedom. Daniela's life took a drastic turn when the prosecution relied heavily on hospital mortality data and the controversial photo, interpreting it as evidence of Daniela's guilt. However, after her conviction, doubts began to surface regarding the validity of the data used to support the charges against her. The investigations, once thorough, failed to account for certain inconsistencies in the statistics, raising questions about whether the case against Daniela had been built on flawed assumptions. The charges were severe, and as a result, Daniela was disbarred and spent over 1,000 days in prison. One of the key points of contention was a photo she took with a 102-year-old patient who passed away, which some interpreted as suspicious. The accusations painted Daniela as a serial killer, and she was thrown into a lengthy and painful legal battle. She was sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty of their murders. However, she showed no remorse because somewhere she knew she was not a killer.
È stata quindi accolta la richiesta del procuratore generale di annullare con rinvio l'ultima sentenza.
After spending over 3 long years behind bars, Daniela's life took a surprising turn. Her case, which had shocked many, was revisited. It all started with a deep dive into the hospital mortality data. Experts reanalyzed the numbers, and what they discovered were hidden factors that challenged the original conclusion about Daniela's involvement in the deaths of her patients. The new evidence led to doubt about the fairness of the charges against her.
Difficult patients, either because the relatives were demanding or because it was difficult to take care of the patient.
In January 2023, the Supreme Court made a powerful decision. They overturned the previous verdicts, declaring Daniela innocent. This moment was nothing short of a miracle for her. After years of being wrongly accused, Daniela was finally free. Her life, which had been turned upside down, was now being set right.
Prosecutors are investigating whether Poggiali could be responsible for the deaths of 38 people.
It was a second chance, a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. Daniela could finally return to her family, and she began dreaming of the future she thought she might never have. Despite the immense pain and confusion she had endured, she remained confident in her skills as a nurse. With her name cleared, she hoped to go back to her nursing career, where she had once felt a sense of purpose. Daniela's story is one of resilience and hope. After enduring years of hardship, she now looks forward to rebuilding her life and career. The emotional toll of being wrongly accused and imprisoned is clear, but Daniela's determination to regain her freedom and continue her work as a nurse shows her strength and optimism for the future. Next up, a case that left even seasoned detectives stunned.
Ma'am, we need you to come with us right now. Please come with us.
They were arguing last night, and I told her that she had to go to get my son alone. She was causing problems.
It all began in June 2017, when Laura Flores Messick, a woman from San Antonio, Texas, whose life spiraled into darkness one fateful night. Behind closed doors, an argument with a man she claimed to love turned deadly. What happened inside that house would leave a family shattered and an entire community stunned. Laura and her boyfriend, Jason Montez de Oca, were in a heated argument inside their home. Jason was a 40-year-old Army veteran who had plans for a future with Laura. But that night, anger turned into brutality. After Jason stopped responding to calls, his mother, Rachel Montez de Oca, went to check on him. When she entered the home, she found her son unresponsive and immediately called for help. Police arrived shortly after, and their body cameras recorded the emotional moment of a mother facing an unimaginable loss. When officers spoke with Laura, she explained that during an argument, Jason had briefly picked up a weapon, but then set it down. She admitted to firing the weapon and injuring his hand. However, the situation escalated further when she went to the kitchen, took a knife, and caused additional harm to ensure he wouldn't get back up. The evidence was overwhelming. At the trial, the jury heard how Laura took Chasen's life with both a gun and a knife. They also learned about her troubled past, including arrests for driving while intoxicated and carrying a substance. Even after she was released on bond, she picked up another DWI charge. While the exact reason for the argument that night was never fully clear, it was obvious their relationship had become filled with conflict. Some said Laura had experienced difficult relationships in the past, but that didn't make the ongoing tension any easier to understand. In April 2019, Laura Flores Messick was found guilty of murder. She faced a sentence that could range from 5 years to life. On May 13, 2019, Judge Catherine Torres Stahl gave her life in prison. However, she showed no sign of guilt. Under the law, she must serve at least 30 years before she can ever ask for parole.
Worst Mother's Day the year before in my life. He wasn't there to say Happy Mother's Day.
Before Laura was taken away, Chasen's mother faced her in court. With tears streaming down her face, she told Laura she forgave her. "I forgive you, Mia," she said softly. "That morning, he told me he wanted to spend the rest of his life with you." But not everyone could forgive. Chasen's cousin Leo was overcome with grief and anger. She told Laura, "Never would I have ever imagined that his life would have been taken." Our next case is about a woman who turned an ordinary object into a deadly weapon.
Are you reporting an assault, ma'am?
Yes, he assaulted me. I hit him with my shoe and he's bleeding. He started beating me up.
In June 2013, a quiet apartment in Houston, Texas became the scene of a crime so bizarre it left everyone stunned. When an emergency call received by a woman named Anna Trujillo was accused of ending her boyfriend's life with an object no one could have expected: the sharp stiletto heel of her shoe. Anna Trujillo, who was 45 years old at the time, claimed she never meant to hurt her boyfriend, Alf Stefan Anderson. According to her, they had been fighting for nearly an hour inside his apartment. She said she was scared and only acted to protect herself, but when police arrived, the scene told a different story. Anderson had been struck at least 25 times in his face and neck with a sharp 5-inch heel. From the start, investigators knew this was not a typical self-defense case. Prosecutors shared that Trujillo did not have any visible injuries to prove she had been attacked first. Meanwhile, Anderson's hands and wrists were covered in defensive wounds, showing he had tried hard to protect himself. As the evidence piled up, Trujillo was arrested and charged with murder. The trial reached its peak when Anna took the stand herself. For 7 hours, she told jurors she never intended to kill Anderson and that she loved him. She said she only fought back because she felt trapped and afraid. However, the prosecution argued she had not only taken his life, but also tried to destroy his reputation by accusing him of mistreatment he never committed. While Anna insisted it was self-defense, prosecutors believed she attacked out of rage, not fear. They told jurors this was not a sudden fight, but a brutal act that ended in a brutal death. After carefully considering all the evidence, the jury did not believe Anna's claim of self-defense. They found her guilty of murder and decided her crime had not happened in the heat of sudden passion. This meant she would face the maximum penalty.
We, the jury, having found the defendant guilty of murder.
In April 2014, Anna Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison. As the verdict was read, she showed no emotion and just smiled the entire time. As the judge announced the decision, Anna tearfully said she never intended for Anderson to be hurt. But for the jury and the community, the facts were clear. A life had been lost under tragic circumstances, and accountability was necessary. Where Anna Trujillo used her stiletto heel as a deadly weapon, our next case is a chilling example of how one woman's obsession led her to ruin a young man's future.
On the inside of the treehouse, under the treehouse, and in the defendant's vehicle.
On June 23, 2018, Julia Enright, a woman from Ashburnham, Massachusetts, invited her former boyfriend, Brandon Chickless, to meet her. She told him they would spend time together in a treehouse near her home. Brandon thought it was just a visit, but Julia had a secret plan. Brandon was only 20 years old. He believed he was meeting Julia to reconnect. However, investigators discovered that Julia had troubling intentions. In her journals, she wrote about a deep fascination with dark themes and a growing obsession with morbid ideas. Some of her entries described collecting animal bones to create what she called bone art. These weren't just fleeting thoughts. Prosecutors believed her imagination had taken a dangerous turn toward reality. When Brandon didn't return home, his family grew concerned and contacted the police. A few days later, officers made a heartbreaking discovery in Rindge, New Hampshire. Evidence soon pointed back to Julia. Investigators found signs inside and around a treehouse that connected her to the incident. They also uncovered troubling messages Julia had sent to her boyfriend before the event, suggesting a disturbing fascination. In court, Julia claimed it was all just imagination, but detectives believed otherwise. Julia finally admitted that she stabbed Brandon several times. She said it was self-defense, claiming he had tried to force himself on her. But prosecutors argued she had planned it all along. In her journal, she had written that she wanted to kill as a gift for her boyfriend, Jonathan Lind. Investigators believe Julia's motive was partly to impress Jonathan, who shared her dark interests. She was also obsessed with death and power. The journals and text messages painted a picture of someone who wanted to feel control and thrill from taking a life. In November 2022, the jury found Julia Enright guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, though she will be eligible for parole in 25 years. However, she showed no regret for her actions. Her boyfriend, Jonathan, was also charged with helping move Brandon's body and misleading the grand jury. Brandon's family said the loss was beyond words. He was a young man with his whole life ahead of him. What hurt the most was that he trusted Julia. They once dated and remained friends after breaking up. In the end, that trust cost him everything. The next case shows how a single argument can end in a deadly split-second decision.
That she's the worst kind of killer. We're not saying that this was premeditated.
On February 20th, 2017, a woman from San Antonio, Texas, whose relationship turned deadly. What started as a regular day ended in a tragedy that no one could take back. Jamie and her boyfriend, Ryan Matthew Perez, were at their apartment on Southeast Military Drive. They had been arguing, and the fight kept growing louder. Neighbors said they heard shouting and angry words coming from inside. The argument built up until it reached a breaking point. Around 6:30 p.m., a gunshot suddenly rang out. Moments later, Jamie put Ryan into her car and drove him to Mission Trail Baptist Hospital. When hospital staff saw his gunshot wound, they immediately called the police. Ryan was soon moved to San Antonio Military Medical Center for emergency surgery. Despite doctors trying everything they could, he was pronounced dead at 8:41 p.m. When investigators arrived, they spoke with Jamie. She said they were checking a gun that had been painted when it suddenly fired by accident. But witnesses told police a different story. They said they'd heard Ryan telling her, "Just do it," right before the shot. Officers also learned the couple had been fighting just before Ryan was shot. Detectives gathered all the evidence and charged Jamie with killing and possession of a controlled substance. As her case moved through the courts, the community followed closely, wondering whether the shooting was truly an accident or something more intentional. While Jamie insisted the shooting was not planned, the argument and Ryan's final words raised serious questions. Some believed Ryan may have dared her in the heat of the moment. Others thought Jamie had simply reached her breaking point after their fight.
She told from the beginning her story's changed 3 times from the time she was first interviewed.
When the trial began, it took the jury only about 2.5 hours to reach a decision. Jamie was found guilty of murder. She chose to have her sentence decided by Judge Lorena Rummel. Her sentencing was scheduled for June 7, 2018, in the 144th State District Court. She was sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a requirement that she serve at least half of that time before becoming eligible for parole. However, she remained remorseless. The case left family and friends heartbroken. One life was lost forever, and another would never be the same. It was a reminder of how anger and conflict can spiral out of control in just one moment, leaving lasting pain for everyone involved. Our next case is horrible, where a girlfriend took a life in one terrible moment.
Emergency.
Hi, my roommate is in pretty bad shape. I really didn't
Okay.
In June 2023, Brittany Holbrook, a woman from Big Coppitt Key, Florida, saw her relationship end in an unexpected way. What began as a normal evening between a couple turned into a crime that left one man dead and an entire family devastated. On the night of June 16th, Brittany and her boyfriend, Tyler Nullish, were at home having drinks together. Later, they went to bed. But by the early morning hours on June 17th, something terrible happened. According to Brittany, there was a gap in her memory. She first said she could not remember what took place. Then she claimed that Tyler had been strangling her. But when deputies examined her, they found no marks on her neck to support that story.
I don't know what happened. I have no idea.
Monroe County Sheriff's Office deputies responded quickly to the scene. They found Tyler lying on the living room floor with a gunshot wound in his back. Brittany was right next to him. The couple's roommate woke up to Brittany screaming. He ran out of his bedroom and saw Tyler bleeding. When he asked Tyler what had happened, Tyler used his last words to say, "That bitch shot me in the back," referring to Brittany. Shockingly, Brittany showed no reaction to this statement. Detectives collected evidence from the scene, including a 9mm handgun and a spent shell casing. The lack of any injuries on Brittany did not match her claims of being attacked. After months of investigation, the case went to trial. The jury listened to every detail, the forensic findings, the testimony from the roommate, and Tyler's final words. In less than an hour, they reached their decision. On February 24, 2025, Brittany Holbrook was found guilty of second-degree murder. While Brittany claimed self-defense, prosecutors argued there was no evidence to support it. There were no visible injuries, no witnesses to back her story, and Tyler's statement pointed directly at her. The motive behind the shooting remained a mix of anger and arguments that spiraled out of control. Brittany was sentenced to 40 years in state prison. For the first 25 years, she will not be eligible for any early release. Prosecutors thanked the jury for their quick and thoughtful verdict and praised law enforcement for their dedication to the case. State Attorney Dennis Ward said this case shows how quickly household arguments can turn deadly. Tyler's family and friends will never forget the man they lost. The neighborhood was left heartbroken by how an ordinary night at home became a life-changing crime. Where Brittany Holbrook took the life of her boyfriend in a moment of deadly conflict, other cases show how hidden conflicts can lead to even more shocking betrayals within families. This next case reveals just how far someone will go to hide the truth.
A woman on trial for killing a 23-year-old in a jealous rage may testify today.
Charges against 2 others in the case were dropped. Fox 4's Dan Godwin is live with the latest.
In October 2020, 23-year-old Maricela Botello traveled from Seattle to Dallas for a visit. But her trip took a tragic turn after a night out in Deep Ellum. She vanished, leaving her family and friends desperate for answers. Months later, her body was found in a rural area near Wilmer, Texas, marking the beginning of a harrowing investigation. The tragedy began months later, when investigators discovered her body in a remote area near Wilmer, Texas, unraveling a disturbing tale. The investigation led authorities to Lisa Dykes, her wife Nina Morano, and rapper Charles Beltran. Prosecutors revealed a tragic sequence of events, suggesting that Dykes, overcome by jealousy, attacked Maricela after finding her with Beltran.
Prosecutors say Dykes killed Botello in a jealous rage in October 2020 because she found Botello in bed with her boyfriend.
They claimed the situation escalated into a fatal confrontation. Evidence indicated that Dykes and Morano were working together to conceal the crime, disposing of Maricela's body in a desolate area. While Dykes and Morano were described as being in a unique relationship with Beltran, Dykes denied this, stating her ties to Beltran were limited to supporting his music career.
He says he somewhat lacked family stability, he did not graduate high school, and he was in and out of jail. Now, he says he did not commit this murder of Maricela Botello. He says he was just a witness.
Despite her claims, investigators found messages and GPS evidence connecting her to the crime scene. This heartbreaking case left Maricela's family grieving the loss of a beloved daughter and sister, while justice sought to bring closure to their pain. As the investigation unfolded, prosecutors presented a strong case against Lisa Dykes and Nina Morano. Using GPS data, they showed that both women had been near the rural area where 23-year-old Maricela Botello's body was later found. This evidence directly contradicted Dykes' claim that she and Morano were merely visiting a FedEx distribution center nearby. Adding to the puzzle, text messages and witness testimonies painted a troubling picture of the events leading up to Maricela's tragic death. Prosecutors argued that jealousy and anger had motivated Dykes' actions, providing further evidence to support their claims. In a dramatic twist, after their initial arrest, Dykes and Morano managed to disable their court-ordered ankle monitors and fled the country. They traveled to Cambodia, where they later claimed they were seeking a fresh start and felt unfairly treated. Their escape only heightened the tension surrounding the case, as it raised questions about their motives and accountability. Despite their efforts to evade justice, the legal system caught up with them, ensuring that the tragic loss of Maricela Botelho would not go unanswered. Her family continued to grieve her loss while seeking justice for the bright young woman taken too soon.
We, the jury, having heretofore found the defendant, Lisa Jo Dykes, guilty of the offense of murder as charged in the indictment.
After 7 days of testimony and only 90 minutes of jury deliberation, Lisa Dykes was found guilty of murder and tampering with evidence. Her wife, Nina Morano, faced separate charges for her involvement. Dykes showed no emotion as the verdict was read, maintaining her composure as Judge Nancy Mulder delivered the ruling. The prosecution highlighted Dykes' actions as a brutal betrayal of trust, while the defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and the investigation flawed. But during the whole trial, Lisa didn't show any remorse.
Then dumped her body after she found the 23-year-old in bed with her boyfriend, Charles Beltran, Miss Dykes' boyfriend, Charles Beltran. Maricela was visiting Dallas.
The aftermath of the trial brought a mix of relief and sorrow. Maricela Botelho's brother, Luis, delivered a heartfelt victim impact statement, sharing the pain of losing his sister. He said, "She is always taking care of us, despite us losing our sister, a beloved firstborn child, and a confidant." He described the profound impact her death had on their family, especially their mother, who continued to show resilience despite the tragedy.
Taking care of us despite of us losing our sister, their firstborn child. The fact that all of this happened, she hurt herself and my dad.
From a tale of jealousy and betrayal of a girlfriend, we move to a shocking crime that was fueled by a devastating mental health crisis.
She's accused of killing her boyfriend by stabbing him 108 times. And now there is fury over the fact that she has been spared jail time after the judge ruled she was not in control.
In May 2018, a tragic and shocking event unfolded in Thousand Oaks, California, when 32-year-old Bryn Spetcher fatally stabbed her boyfriend, Chad O'Melia, more than 100 times. What initially seemed like a brutal crime turned into a controversial legal battle surrounding mental health and substance-induced psychosis. Bryn and Chad had been dating for only a few weeks when tragedy struck on the night of May 27, 2018. The couple was spending time together at Chad's apartment in Thousand Oaks, California. They decided to smoke marijuana, a substance Bryn had little experience with. After her first attempt failed to produce any noticeable effect, Chad reportedly encouraged her to try another hit. What followed was a devastating turn of events. Bryn began to experience what experts later described as cannabis-induced psychotic disorder. She became disoriented, overwhelmed, and completely out of control. In a haze of confusion, Bryn grabbed a serrated bread knife and attacked Chad. By the time the police arrived, the scene was heart-wrenching. Chad lay motionless, and Bryn was holding the knife, hysterical and in shock. In her frenzied state, Bryn even turned the knife on herself, injuring her neck. Officers acted quickly, using a taser and batons to disarm and restrain her. Chad was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving his family and friends devastated. What began as a quiet evening turned into a moment of unimaginable sorrow, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. The tragic incident quickly gained global attention as Chad's loved ones called for justice, struggling to come to terms with the shocking loss. In the courtroom, prosecutors painted a grim and heartbreaking picture of the events that unfolded. They described the severity of the attack, highlighting the 108 stab wounds Chad suffered as a sign of overwhelming and uncontrollable anger. However, Bryn's defense offered a different perspective. They explained that her actions were not intentional, but rather the result of a rare mental health crisis. Experts testified that Bryn had experienced what is known as a cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, a condition triggered by her reaction to marijuana that night. They described how her mental state at the time left her unable to understand what was happening or control her actions.
And as I got closer to him, I saw the knife in my left hand stab his abdomen. And then it just went black.
The case left many torn. On one side, Chad's family sought accountability for the devastating loss of their son and brother. On the other hand, Bryn's legal team pleaded for understanding, emphasizing the role her mental health played in the tragedy. The courtroom became a place of emotional testimony and difficult questions, as everyone grappled with how such an unthinkable event could have happened. After years of legal proceedings, a jury convicted Bryn of involuntary manslaughter. In January 2024, Judge David Worley sentenced her to 2 years of probation and 100 hours of community service instead of prison. This decision, which acknowledged her cannabis-induced psychosis, sparked strong reactions. Chad's father, Sean O'Melia, voiced his outrage, claiming the ruling set a dangerous precedent, saying, "He just gave everyone in the state of California who smokes marijuana a license to kill someone."
I'm just so sorry that he went through that pain.
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
In her testimony, that everything was about her.
Bryn and her family wept in relief after the judge's decision, while Chad's loved ones were left devastated, feeling justice had not been served. The public also went on roads for justice. The case highlighted the complex interplay between mental health, substance use, and criminal responsibility, leaving the community divided over whether Bryn's punishment fit her crime.
Bryn moved to Los Angeles to start her career as an audiologist, her hearing service dog, Aria, by her side. The two spent much of their free time.
Bryn's case highlights the complexities of mental health and justice. The next case shows how volatile relationships spiraled into tragedy.
Loved each other deeply, and they fought with the same level of intensity. And when one of them ends up dead, police have to decide if it was self-defense or premeditated murder.
On a quiet September night in 2015, Kaylee Whitehall and her boyfriend, Custon Johnson, were embroiled in a heated argument at their shared home in Kentucky. The confrontation would end in tragedy, leading to a criminal case that captivated the community and revealed the dark undercurrents of a troubled relationship. The argument began when Custon Johnson learned that Kaylee Whitehall planned to leave him. What started as a heated exchange quickly escalated into chaos, with their disagreements spreading throughout the house. Witnesses later described a tumultuous scene where emotions ran high. During the altercation, Johnson reportedly placed Whitehall in a headlock, attempting to control the situation. In response, Whitehall threw objects in an effort to free herself. The tension mounted as the conflict continued to spiral out of control.
I couldn't breathe and I felt like I was scared.
Amid the confusion, Whitehall made a critical decision. She grabbed a knife and returned to confront Johnson in the bedroom. What happened next changed both of their lives forever. In the midst of the struggle, Whitehall stabbed Johnson. Wounded and disoriented, Johnson managed to make his way to the bathroom, but his injuries were too severe. He collapsed near the shower, unable to recover from the damage inflicted. Tragically, his life slipped away shortly after. The devastating moment marked the tragic end of their relationship and set the stage for a courtroom battle that would later determine Whitehall's fate. It was a heartbreaking reminder of how conflicts can escalate with irreversible consequences. In the midst of the dispute, Whitehall stabbed Johnson. Injured and bleeding, he stumbled into the bathroom, collapsing near the shower. Tragically, Johnson succumbed to his wounds shortly after. The case reached the courtroom in September 2015, as the tragic events of that fateful day were laid bare before a jury. Prosecutors described the incident as an act of reckless violence, pushing back against Whitehall's claim of self-defense. Brittany Jones, a key witness, shared her account of what happened. She explained how she tried to step in and separate the couple during their heated argument, but was unable to calm the situation. She also testified to seeing Whitehall pick up a knife and return to the bedroom where Johnson was, a moment that would later prove pivotal in the case. Prosecutor Kim Gogegan presented a strong argument, emphasizing that Whitehall's actions didn't align with a narrative of self-defense. Detectives who investigated the crime scene further strengthened the prosecution's case. They revealed that the evidence contradicted Whitehall's initial claim of stabbing Johnson in the kitchen while he was holding her. Instead, the findings pointed to the fatal act occurring in the bedroom. The jury listened carefully to these details, piecing together the story of what had happened. It was a tragic moment that left the courtroom grappling with questions of accountability and the choices that led to such a devastating outcome. After a 3-day trial, the jury found Whitehall guilty of reckless homicide. On November 7th, Warren Circuit Judge Steve Wilson upheld their recommendation of a 4-year sentence. Whitehall, who had remained stoic throughout the trial, returned to custody to continue serving her time at the Warren County Regional Jail.
Motion pays penalty. We, the jury, fix the defendant's sentence of reckless homicide.
Under the terms of her sentence, Whitehall is eligible for parole after serving 15% of her term, which means she could be released as early as March. This case brought heartbreak to both families involved and served as a stark reminder of how quickly domestic disputes can escalate into irreversible tragedies. Prosecutors argued that Johnson's life ended senselessly, while Whitehall maintained her actions stemmed from fear. Kaylee Whitehall's tragic crime leads to a heartbreaking loss. Next is a mysterious death that has sparked allegations of conspiracy.
And the Massachusetts Supreme Court is weighing arguments over whether to dismiss Karen Reed's murder charges. Reed is accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend with her SUV and leaving him to die.
Karen Reed stands accused of killing her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, in a mysterious and tragic incident. O'Keefe, a Boston police officer with a 16-year career, was found dead in the front yard of another officer's house in January 2022. Reed, his girlfriend, has claimed her innocence, alleging that law enforcement is trying to frame her for his death. The case took an unexpected twist when a 9-week trial ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. Karen Reed faced serious charges, including second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. The prosecution was determined to try again, pledging to retry Reed for her role in the tragic death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
They arrived at the victim's home. The defendant had Ms. McCabe looked at that same cracked taillight. Ms. McCabe described the passenger side right rear taillight as cracked.
However, Reed's defense team argued that she was being unfairly accused. They claimed that law enforcement officers, some of whom were closely connected to the victim, were involved in a conspiracy to frame her for his death. The defense painted a picture of a complicated situation, suggesting that there were many unanswered questions surrounding O'Keefe's death, and that Reed's actions had been misunderstood.
To move her murder retrial to a later date. Reed is charged in connection with the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
As the case continues, the mystery deepens, with both sides presenting strong arguments. Reed insists she's innocent and is determined to clear her name, while O'Keefe's family and friends search for justice. The courtroom remains a place of tension as everyone hopes the truth will eventually come to light and bring resolution to this heartbreaking situation. The night of John O'Keefe's death started like any other, but tension had been growing in his relationship with Karen Reed. After a disagreement at a bar, Reed dropped O'Keefe off at an after-party, unaware that this would be their last night together. The next morning, Reed discovered his body outside the home of Brian Albert, a retired Boston police sergeant.
And I would note, the Commonwealth's characterization of that interview is incorrect and incomplete. I submitted additional reporting from Boston 25.
Investigators found clues linking Reed's vehicle to the scene, including a broken taillight and traces of O'Keefe's DNA on the car. The evidence suggested that Reed's SUV might have been involved in the incident, raising questions about what happened that night. However, Reed's defense team argued that O'Keefe's death could have been the result of a violent altercation at the after-party. They suggested that other people at the gathering, including Albert and his family, might have played a role. During the whole trial, Karen was just smiling as she knew that everything would be in his favor.
The judge denied the defense request to bring the jurors back to court to find out if they actually reached verdicts on those 2 counts. And now the Massachusetts Supreme Court will make a decision.
The defense painted a picture of a chaotic situation where the truth was unclear and no one really knew what had happened. As the investigation continues, the search for answers grows more complicated, with both sides trying to piece together the events leading up to that fateful morning. Despite the evidence presented by the prosecution, Reed's defense argued that the investigation was biased, particularly due to the close relationships between some of the key figures involved, including Albert's ties to law enforcement.
The sneaker was completely buried. It wasn't until we started digging through the snow that we found the sneaker.
Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south?
They claimed that Reed was unfairly targeted as a suspect. The judge denied a request to dismiss the charges, and a retrial has been scheduled for April 1st. Throughout the trial, Reed maintained her innocence, while O'Keefe's family and friends sought justice for his death. The case has left many questioning whether the right person is on trial, and whether justice can truly be served in such a complicated and emotionally charged situation.
You alone determine what evidence to believe. You determine the facts of this case.
The next case takes us to Melanie Lynn McGuire, whose story unravels a chilling account of calculated murder and a trail of shocking evidence that left investigators and the public reeling.
The latest and third suitcase containing human remains was brought ashore Sunday. Police got a tip from a recreational boater about its location in the water near the second island of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
In 2004, Melanie Lynn McGuire was living what seemed to be an idyllic life. A nurse and mother, she appeared to have everything together. But behind closed doors, her marriage to William Bill McGuire was unraveling. What started as marital discord would escalate into a chilling case that horrified an entire community.
His name was Bill McGuire.
He was a husband, a father of 2 young boys. He had 2 sisters.
The victim of a vicious crime.
It literally appeared as if though his body was cut to fit these suitcases.
On April 28, 2004, Bill McGuire vanished without warning. His disappearance puzzled friends and family, but the situation turned sinister days later when a suitcase washed ashore in Virginia. Inside were Bill's dismembered remains. The gruesome discovery would soon lead investigators to Melanie, whose actions revealed a cold and calculated murder.
There were different parts of the body. So in one suitcase, there was kind of a torso with the arms and head still attached. In the second suitcase, there was the pelvis area, and in the third suitcase, there was really the legs down.
Bill's body was found in 3 separate suitcases scattered across the Chesapeake Bay, each containing a horrifying piece of the puzzle. Melanie claimed her husband had left after an argument, but investigators discovered she had purchased a gun just days before Bill disappeared. Evidence of large garbage bags, cleaning supplies, and receipts tied Melanie to the crime, further unraveling her carefully crafted story.
The woman who was on trial for her very life. She says the real truth behind the crime has never been revealed.
With no history of violence and no apparent motive for murder.
Prosecutors argued that Melanie had drugged Bill, shot him twice, and dismembered his body to cover her tracks. The motive? To end her marriage and pursue a new life with her lover, a doctor she worked with.
Melanie McGuire, nicknamed the Suitcase Killer.
On April 23rd, 2007, I was convicted of the murder and dismemberment of my husband.
In the courtroom, the prosecution laid out a chilling narrative supported by forensic evidence. Fibers found in the suitcase matched those in Melanie's home. Surveillance footage and financial records revealed the purchase of supplies used to commit and conceal the crime. Throughout the trial, Melanie sat with an eerie calm, denying all accusations. Her composed demeanor contrasted with the shocking evidence, leaving the jury and those in the courtroom unsettled.
Guilty.
How do you find this? At the count of the indictment charging Melanie McGuire with desecrating human remains between on or about April 28, 2004 and on or about May 5, 2004 in the township of Woodbridge, Middlesex County, New Jersey, elsewhere and within the jurisdiction of this court.
Guilty.
After a grueling trial, the jury delivered a swift verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Melanie Lynn McGuire was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2007. Bill's family described the immense pain of losing him in such a horrific way, but they found solace in knowing justice had been served.
In this case, the crime was so heinous, so cruel, and so depraved that the court finds that the maximum sentence should be imposed.
Inside the courtroom, the pain of the victim's family was unmistakable as they listened to the horrific details of what happened to William McGuire. Tearful statements from loved ones painted a picture of a man who was full of life and deeply missed. But it was Melanie's demeanor that drew the most attention.
When I remember my uncle, the first thing I see is a waterlogged suitcase. All we can ask is that you take her freedom as she took our Billy.
Throughout the trial, she maintained an air of calmness, almost eerily composed, even as prosecutors laid out damning evidence. There were moments when she appeared to scribble notes, her expression unreadable, as if detached from the devastating consequences of her actions.
Or about April 26, 2004 and on or about May 5, 2004 in the township of Woodbridge, Middlesex County, New Jersey, elsewhere and within the jurisdiction of this court.
Guilty.
During her sentencing, Melanie's composure cracked just slightly. She shook her head and whispered to her attorney, still insisting on her innocence. While the judge delivered the life sentence, she avoided looking directly at the victim's family, her eyes fixed downward. It was a moment that underscored her refusal to accept responsibility, leaving those in attendance with a haunting impression of a woman incapable of remorse. Next, we turn to the unsettling case of Eloma Curry Walker, whose actions revealed a chilling disregard for life.
The coward who did this will be caught. I am not afraid of anything. Don't get it twisted. But what happened here is outrageous, past outrageous. My prayers, my heart, my soul go out to his wife and his children. For them to lose such a loving person that I'm hearing of.
In the quiet hours of Cleveland, Ohio, a firefighter's life of service and love was cut short in a betrayal that shocked the community. William Walker, a beloved veteran firefighter, was gunned down just steps away from the home he shared with his new wife, Uloma Curry Walker. What initially seemed like a robbery gone wrong turned out to be something far darker. A calculated act of greed orchestrated by the person he trusted most.
10 years ago this month, Cleveland firefighter Lieutenant William Walker was killed, shot in the driveway of his home in what authorities would learn was a murder-for-hire plot concocted by his wife.
At first, William Walker's murder left investigators puzzled. The 45-year-old firefighter had no known enemies, and his dedication to his family and community made the crime seem senseless. But beneath the surface, Uloma Curry Walker had been living a lie. Drowning in debt and desperate to find a way out, she devised a chilling plan. Just 4 months after marrying William, she plotted his murder to claim his $100,000 life insurance policy, viewing his life as a way to erase her financial troubles. Uloma approached her 17-year-old daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, Chad Paget, to help recruit the hitman. Chad in turn enlisted Chris Hine, a young acquaintance. For Uloma, this wasn't just about money. It was about manipulation, using everyone around her to achieve her sinister goal.
November 3rd, 2013, Walker was shot multiple times in his driveway. He didn't make it.
I actually worked at Metro Hospital in the ER, and Will was my patient. So I knew he was coming in when I heard that he was shot.
On November 3rd, 2013, Uloma's plan came to fruition. William had returned home after a long day of work when Chris Hine ambushed him outside his garage and shot him multiple times. The neighborhood was rocked by the sound of gunfire, and police quickly arrived on the scene. Uloma's act began to unravel almost immediately. She played the grieving widow, but quickly raised suspicion with her calm demeanor and inconsistent stories. Investigators discovered that William's life insurance policy still listed his ex-wife as the beneficiary, meaning Uloma stood to gain nothing from the murder. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered damning evidence. Chad Paget confessed to his role, exposing the web of manipulation Uloma had spun. Text messages and testimonies revealed her attempts to orchestrate the crime and silence those involved.
Monday, Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Tim McGinty announced that a total of 5 people were involved in killing him in what he calls a murder for hire, orchestrated by his wife, Uloma Walker Curry. Investigators say Uloma was committing financial fraud in his name. They say she was afraid he might find out what she was doing and assumed she could use his life insurance to pay debts.
98191, co-defendant D, Uloma Curry. Co-defendant is pending on the docket.
Do you have an attorney? Do you have any money or funds to hire an attorney?
In 2017, Uloma Curry Walker was brought to trial. The courtroom was gripped with tension as the prosecution laid out the horrifying details of the case. Testimonies from her daughter and Chad Paget painted a chilling picture of her willingness to exploit even her own family. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of aggravated murder, conspiracy, and other charges. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing, condemning Uloma for her cold, calculated actions. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And so we are just shocked and distraught. My father did not deserve this at all. He was such a great man, a great role model.
He was a great man, a great father, a great firefighter, a great partner. We worked together on the same fire trucks a lot.
Brian Webb remembers him as the guy who could cheer you up and make you laugh after a tough call.
I'm just really hurt to know that my mother was able to do something like this. It's just so upsetting. It's so sad.
In the courtroom, William's family broke down as the verdict was read, struggling to comprehend how someone he loved could betray him so completely. His colleagues from the fire department described him as a selfless hero, a man who dedicated his life to saving others, only to have his own life stolen in such a brutal way. Uloma, however, showed no remorse. Her blank expression as the sentencing was announced sent chills through the courtroom, a stark contrast to the tears and heartbreak of William's loved ones. Up next, we shift to the unsettling case of Kelly Cochran, whose chilling actions left a path of destruction and raised disturbing questions about her true intentions.
When you look into the eyes of the so-called devil woman of Michigan, what do you see?
I see exactly what I saw from the very beginning. She's one of the most manipulative people that you'll ever meet.
Her and her husband had entered into this agreement on their wedding night that if one had an affair on the other, that it was their responsibility to kill the person that they had the affair with.
On the surface, Kelly Cochran appeared to live an ordinary life in Michigan with her husband, Jason Cochran. But behind closed doors, their relationship was far from typical. The couple had made a dark and chilling pact. If one of them ever cheated, they would be forced to murder the lover. This twisted agreement would set the stage for a crime so horrifying it left investigators struggling to piece together the depths of Kelly's cruelty.
As soon as you walk into the house, the hair stands up on the back of your neck.
Something happened to him. I knew that in my heart.
Kelly wore the pants in the family, so whatever she wanted, Jason did.
In October 2014, Chris Regan, a 53-year-old co-worker and lover of Kelly Cochran, mysteriously vanished in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. He had been preparing to move out of town when he suddenly disappeared without a trace. When police began investigating, they found Chris's car abandoned at a park-and-ride lot. Inside, there was a sticky note with directions to Kelly Cochran's home, immediately placing her at the center of suspicion.
I actually was institutionalized a little over a month ago.
What happened to Chris?
With her, it was like lie, truth.
Kelly initially denied any involvement, insisting she knew nothing about Chris's whereabouts. But her behavior raised red flags. As investigators delved deeper, they discovered that Kelly and Jason Cochran had lured Chris to their home under the guise of a romantic evening, only to brutally ambush him. Jason shot Chris with a rifle, carrying out the deadly agreement while Kelly stood by.
Chris Regan went missing in Michigan's Upper Peninsula in October 2014. The investigation into his disappearance went nowhere. Cochran and her husband Jason had been questioned, but not arrested.
What began as a pact to punish infidelity soon spiraled into a nightmarish cover-up. The couple dismembered Chris's body, disposing of his remains in the rugged wilderness of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Despite their efforts, Kelly's mounting inconsistencies and the evidence pointing to her involvement kept the police closing in.
Shortly after the couple moved back to Northwest Indiana, when Jason Cochran died from an apparent heroin overdose, that the pieces began to fall into place.
After years of suspicion, Kelly's world began to unravel. In 2016, Jason Cochran was found dead in their home in Indiana, reportedly from a heroin overdose. But Jason's family believed otherwise, and an autopsy revealed that his death was intentional. Kelly had injected him with a lethal dose, silencing him permanently and ending their dark partnership.
Whom she said her now dead husband had killed, then with her help dismembered. She even led investigators to where they dumped the remains.
Out in that area? A little to the right and back towards us a little.
Now a widow, Kelly fled the area, but authorities soon caught up with her. During questioning, she made stunning confessions, admitting not only to Jason's murder, but also to helping plan and carry out Chris Regan's killing. She even claimed to have killed multiple other victims, though these confessions have never been fully substantiated.
Convicted murderer Kelly Cochran was sentenced to life in prison without a chance of parole this morning. Cochran was found guilty of first-degree murder, aiding and abetting, along with 4 other felony charges in late February.
In 2017, Kelly Cochran was convicted of Chris Regan's murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She was also found guilty of Jason Cochran's death, adding another 65 years to her sentence. Prosecutors described her as manipulative, calculating, and devoid of remorse. A woman who not only orchestrated brutal crimes, but reveled in the chaos she left behind.
Do you have a conscience? Has this have you always felt this way? I've always been like this, man.
Kelly's chilling goodbye letters, written shortly before her arrest, hinted at her complete detachment from reality. She referred to herself as a devil in human form, leaving no doubt about the darkness within her.
Everybody just cried, and Chris's family was sitting right behind me, and the first thing I did is just turn around and hug them.
In the courtroom, Chris Regan's loved ones sat in stunned silence as Kelly detailed the events leading to his death. The descriptions of her betrayal and brutality were almost too much to bear. Jason Cochran's family, still grappling with his murder, expressed their grief over being deceived by Kelly's manipulative persona.
If he would have never met me, he'd be here today.
35-year-old Kelly Cochran will never again walk free, convicted of killing her lover and then her husband.
Kelly's demeanor during her trial was cold and emotionless, leaving those in attendance shaken by her lack of humanity. Her statements about having more victims further horrified everyone, cementing her reputation as one of the most chilling killers to stand trial. Now we turn to the case of Nikki Sue Enzel, a woman whose disturbing crime left a lasting impact on those closest to her and continues to haunt those who heard her story.
Nikki Sue Melissa Enzel. Conspiracy to commit murder. As to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Nikki Sue Melissa Enzel guilty.
It was not enough that Nikki Sue Enzel was already cheating on her husband. She had to make matters worse by having him killed. On January 2nd, 2020, a frantic 911 call came in. Nikki Sue came home to find that her house was on fire. She said that she was scared that her husband was trapped inside. According to Nikki, she'd been away from home for a few days when she got a call from her husband's coworker, who said he hadn't been to work for a few days.
I came out here to check. My husband sent a text message that he didn't come in today, and I've been good 3 days, and so I'm coming here to check. And I walk in, I open the back door, and I walk in, and the house is smoky. I can't get in the door. It's smoky in the house.
When firefighters got to the scene, they found the body of 42-year-old Chad Ensel inside his bedroom. He was pronounced dead, and an autopsy was carried out. It was soon revealed that the fire was not what killed Chad. He had been shot multiple times by a shotgun. At first, investigators believed that he had committed suicide and that the house fire was caused by a propane heater. Another investigation revealed that Chad couldn't have committed suicide, and that's when the story that Nikki gave began to crumble. The gun was found near the bed and not near Chad on the floor. It was also revealed that the fire had been deliberate after the accelerant was found in the bedroom. At first, no one really suspected Nikki. That was until security footage showed Nikki with a man in multiple places over their area. It was then revealed that this was Earl Howard, Nikki's lover.
Show that Nikki Sue Ensel and Earl Howard agreed to kill Chad Ensel, agreed to set the house on fire, to collect the insurance benefits and to cover up the murder, and agreed to tamper with evidence by destroying or disposing of that second shotgun shell and setting the fire to cover up the evidence of the murder.
Nikki had been in an affair with Earl for a while before deciding to go see him in the motel. While she denied that she hadn't been back to the house before the fire, CCTV footage soon showed otherwise. After constant interrogation, Nikki claimed that Howard was the one who shot Chad while they were struggling over the gun. She said she waited in the car. Her story changed again when she claimed that she had never seen Howard before. Despite this, prosecutors did not believe her. Howard, on the other hand, said that Nikki had shot her husband and that he offered to set the house on fire to burn evidence. Prosecutors argued that they planned to kill him and run away with his insurance money. Nikki was charged with conspiracy to commit arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to tamper with physical evidence. In February 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In court, she tried to appeal her sentence.
I get told I need to take a plea deal. It's going to be this way. I don't want to. I want to have my chance.
Her appeal was dismissed, and she is serving her sentence in North Dakota. Howard ended up pleading guilty to various charges, including conspiracy to commit murder and arson. In making the plea deal, prosecutors agreed to drop a murder charge. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison in February 2022. If you thought things couldn't get more brutal, think again. Joseph McAlpin brought terror to a whole new level.
If you was mad enough to go in there and rob and kill that family, why are you not man enough to tell everybody in this courtroom what you did?
In 2017, a quiet family-owned car dealership in Cleveland, Ohio became the scene of a chilling crime. Joseph McAlpin walked through its doors with one plan in mind: stealing cars. But what happened next was far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined, leaving a family shattered and a community in shock. On a regular day at Mr. Cars, the owners, Michael Kuznick, and his wife, Trina Tomola Kuznick, were working hard to provide for their family. They had no idea that danger was about to walk through their door. McAlpin, along with two other men who waited nearby, came not just to take property, but to take lives. When the couple's son came to the dealership later that day, he was met with a heartbreaking scene. His parents were found dead inside the office with their pet. The police were called immediately. Detectives began piecing together what had happened. Surveillance footage and evidence pointed straight to McAlpin. Prosecutors said that after a serious incident involving the couple and their pet, McAlpin and his accomplices stole 2 cars and drove away, leaving behind devastation. As the case progressed, more details emerged. McAlpin had been the one to pull the trigger, while the other 2 waited down the street. The motive was simple. He wanted to steal vehicles. But in his attempt to take what wasn't his, he committed a brutal double killing. When the trial began, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Investigators learned that McAlpin planned the crime to get money and cars. Instead of walking away with quick cash, he left 2 people dead and destroyed a family's sense of safety forever. McAlpin was found guilty on all charges, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, burglary, kidnapping, and grand theft. He was sentenced to death.
Therefore, unanimously find that the sentence of death should be imposed on defendant Joseph McAlpin.
His execution was scheduled for May 19, 2026. However, recently, a court granted him a stay of execution, meaning the sentence will be delayed until all of his appeals and other legal processes are complete. As the family members of the defendant spoke, the defendant began to cry, realizing for the first time what it felt like for the victim's son to lose both parents in the place they had built together as a family. While justice was served in court, the pain of this loss will never fully go away. Our next case takes cruelty to another level. A killer who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted.
What's the problem? I've been abducted. Who abducted you? Sean Green.
On September 16, 2016, police in Ashland, Ohio received a chilling emergency call from a woman who whispered that she was being held against her will. That call would uncover the horrifying crimes of Sean Great, a man later revealed to be a serial killer who had secretly terrorized northern Ohio for years. Sean Michael Great was born in 1976 and seemed, at first, like any other kid. He played sports, hung out with his neighbors, and came across as friendly to many. But behind closed doors, his family life was full of pain. His parents divorced when he was very young, and his mother left the family when he was just 11. These early wounds grew into deep anger and dark thoughts. As he grew older, Sean got in trouble with the law, including burglary and assault, but no one imagined the darkness that would follow. From 2006 to 2016, several women disappeared in Ohio. They were mothers, daughters, and friends. For years, their loved ones had no idea what happened to them. Everything changed that day in 2016. The brave woman who called an emergency had been tied up for 3 days, mistreated by Great inside an abandoned house. When police arrived, they rescued her and found the bodies of 2 other missing women hidden in the same house. The investigation grew quickly. Great confessed to killing 5 women. Authorities searched different counties, uncovering more victims, including a young mother named Dana Lowry, whose body had been unidentified for years. Great even led officers to more crime scenes himself. As detectives dug deeper, they learned that Sean had been living a double life. He pretended to be kind and helpful to gain trust, then turned violent. He strangled his victims and sometimes kept their bodies hidden near where he lived. In court documents, prosecutors described his actions as truly depraved and horrifying. During his trial, Great simply stated, "I apologized for my actions," and showed no remorse. In one shocking moment, he even claimed the victims were already gone in their minds because of hardships in their lives. The courtroom was filled with heartbreak as families heard the awful details of how their loved ones were treated. When asked why he committed these terrible acts, Great gave a strange explanation. He said he believed the government had taken over people's minds through assistance programs. He called it their bodies flopping wherever it can flop, showing he had created his twisted reasons to justify hurting innocent women.
No reason for anybody to know exactly who that man is because he's worthless.
In 2018, Sean Great was found guilty of killing Stacey Stanley and Elizabeth Griffith. He was sentenced to death for those crimes. However, he remained stone-faced, showing no regret for his actions. Later, he also pleaded guilty to the deaths of Rebecca Lacey, Candace Cunningham, and Dana Lowry. For these, he received multiple life sentences without any chance of parole. His appeals were denied, and the court decided there were no mistakes that could undo his death sentence. Though an execution date was set, ongoing legal processes delayed it further. Families of the victims expressed relief that he would never be free to harm anyone again. Police officers and prosecutors called it one of the most tragic and disturbing investigations they had ever faced. But amid so much darkness, there was also a moment of hope. The woman who bravely escaped and called for help saved her own life and uncovered the truth that had been hidden for so long. Her courage brought justice to families who had waited years for answers. Our next case is pure evil, a killer who hunted across state lines, leaving heartbreak wherever he went.
I was promised on the death penalty that in 7 years, the state of Florida would take care of this.
This is the chilling story of Glenn Edward Rogers, a man known as the cross-country killer. For nearly 3 decades, he drifted across America, blending in as a friendly stranger, while secretly leaving behind a trail of fear and heartbreak. From quiet towns to busy cities, no one knew when or where he would strike next, or who would fall victim to his deadly charm. Glenn's troubles began in early life. He left school before turning 16 and got married young. As the years went on, he faced allegations of mistreatment and became involved in crime. But it was in the 1990s when things turned truly alarming. Authorities started to connect him to the deaths of several women in different states. Women who trusted him, only to meet a tragic end. In 1995, a series of suspicious deaths brought Rogers to the attention of law enforcement nationwide. Investigators discovered he had been seen with women shortly before their lives were taken. One of the first clear links was to Sandra Gallagher in California. Sandra's life was cut short, and her vehicle was found burned near Rogers' apartment. From there, investigators tracked him across Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana, where similar cases emerged. Police collected fingerprints, traced stolen property, and spoke with witnesses who had seen Rogers with the victims. When he was finally stopped in Kentucky after a long highway chase, he was driving a car that belonged to one of the women. His arrest made national headlines, and he was soon named on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. In court, Rogers faced trials in both Florida and California. The evidence against him included witness accounts, forensic proof, and patterns of behavior. He was convicted of killing in the deaths of Sandra Gallagher and Tina Marie Cripps, and sentenced to death in each state. However, at the time of sentencing, he remained silent, even while in prison. Rogers filed many appeals, claiming mistakes had been made in his trial, but none of them changed the outcome.
He was convicted of murdering 2 women in Florida and California, but he was a suspect in several other murders.
While Rogers never offered a clear reason for his actions, prosecutors described him as someone who used charm to gain trust, then took advantage of the women he met. Some investigators believed he targeted people for financial gain or out of a desire for control. Rogers once even claimed he committed dozens of killings, though he later said he was only joking. After nearly 3 decades on death row, Glenn Rogers' final appeals were denied. In April 2025, the governor of Florida signed his death warrant. Rogers was executed by lethal injection on May 15, 2025. For numerous families who had lost someone dear, Rogers' execution offered a sense of comfort and finality. Some expressed that they could now find peace, knowing he would no longer pose a threat to anyone. Others believed that his passing was gentler than the suffering he had inflicted. Yet, after so many years of anticipation, the moment had finally come when they could begin to move forward. The next case shows that sometimes the most frightening conflicts occur within the very place that should feel the safest: home.
How did you feel at the time he touched you? I felt like I had to defend myself, whether or not.
On December 20th, 2019, in Jacksonville, Florida, a day that started like any other ended in an unthinkable crime. Marcus Fishburne was staying with his roommate and the roommate's girlfriend, 25-year-old Aisha Levy. No one could imagine how this visit would end. That evening, Levy's boyfriend came home to a terrible scene. The apartment was covered in blood. The silence felt heavy and frightening. On the table, he found a note. Fishburne wrote that he and Levy were both dead and warned that the boyfriend would be next. The police were called right away. As they searched the home, they discovered Levy's body. She had been wrapped carefully and hidden inside a plastic storage bin, tucked away in a closet. It was clear that this was not an accident, but a planned act of cruelty. Detectives worked quickly to track Fishburne down. He was trying to run away on a Greyhound bus, but did not get far. Officers arrested him before he could leave the state. As investigators uncovered more about the case, troubling new details emerged. Fishburne had confronted Levy while she was getting out of the shower. He restrained her so she couldn't defend herself, then carried out a violent attack that tragically ended her life. Although Fishburne never clearly explained why he committed such a cruel act, the threats he left behind in his note showed anger and a desire to harm not only Levy, but also her boyfriend. The case went to court and the jury listened to all the evidence. 10 out of 12 jurors voted to recommend the death penalty. The judge agreed. Marcus Fishburne was officially sentenced to death on June 13, 2024 by a Duval County judge in Florida for killing Aisha Levy.
That the defendant be sentenced to death, and after assessing the proven aggravating factors and all of the mitigating circumstances.
However, he didn't show any guilt for his act. But this was not the end of his harmful actions. In 2022, while in prison, Fishburne attacked his cellmate by cutting his neck with a razor blade attached to a comb. He was given an additional 5 years in prison for that crime. Aisha's family will never be the same after losing her in such a tragic way. The courtroom was filled with sadness, anger, and relief that justice had finally been served. The case stands as a reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered and how important it is to speak up when someone shows sign of dangerous behavior. Our next case is about a drifter who used his charm to deceive, leaving sorrow and loss in every town he passed through.
Where the haystack in this sense is female DNA, and there might be some male DNA, the needles, but you may not be able to see them.
In November 2015, a terrible crime shook a quiet neighborhood in Youngstown, Ohio. leaving everyone in disbelief. A woman named Erica Huff, who used a wheelchair because of multiple sclerosis, lost her life in a brutal attack that shocked the entire community. On the morning of November 5th, Erica was home on Cleveland Street. Her mother was with her, and a visiting nurse came by. Later that day, the nurse left, and not long after, something unthinkable happened. Lance Hundley, a man who knew Erica, attacked her inside her own house. He beat her severely and also assaulted her mother. The conflict was so extreme that the home was set on fire while Erica and her mother were still inside. When emergency crews arrived, the house was in flames. Firefighters and officers rushed in and found Erica's mother unconscious from the beating. Erica herself had already passed away. Hundley was still inside the burning house and refused to come out. Officers pulled him to safety. Detectives began reconstructing the events and soon found traces of gasoline on Hundley's clothing. DNA evidence further linked him to the scene. Investigators concluded that Hundley had waited for the nurse to leave before carrying out the attack, a sign that the act had been carefully planned. In May 2018, after a long trial, a jury heard all the evidence. They listened to Erica's mother, who bravely testified about what she had experienced that day.
I'm on the couch. I couldn't see their face, and they was choking me out from behind.
Hundley tried to say that he had been attacked himself and claimed he woke up to see someone else in the home with a gas can. But the jury did not believe his story. They decided Hundley had planned and carried out this terrible act. Prosecutors argued that Hundley acted with prior calculation and design. The attack was not sudden or accidental. It was deliberate and intended to end Erica's life. Jurors recommended the death penalty. However, he remained emotionless. Judge Maureen Sweeney agreed and sentenced Hundley to death. The Ohio Supreme Court later reviewed the case and upheld the sentence, ruling that there was enough evidence to prove Hundley's guilt. This case left many people heartbroken. Erica Huff was a woman who faced health challenges every day, yet she lived her life with courage. The conflict she suffered was cruel and senseless. While her mother survived, she had to carry the memory of that day forever. The community still remembers Erica, and the ruling brought some measure of justice to her family. Where Lance Hundley killed someone he knew, Neil Entwistle took the lives of his relatives for financial gain and then tried to cover it up. Some killers hide behind charm, others behind silence. Stephen Lorenzo hid behind pure evil.
The death penalty and nothing less.
What he did to my son before murdering him should be done to him. Eye for an eye.
In 2003, two young men, Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholz, vanished from Tampa's vibrant community. Their families and friends hoped they would return safely, but those hopes were soon shattered when the truth about their fate was revealed. Jason and Michael were last seen alive in December 2003. Their sudden disappearance alarmed their loved ones, but no one could have imagined the horror they endured. Days later, Michael's body was found in his car in an apartment complex parking lot. Jason, however, was never found. Investigators later learned that he had been dismembered and his remains were discarded in dumpsters, making it impossible to recover his body. As police dug deeper into the case, they uncovered disturbing details. Stephen Lorenzo used dating apps and bars to meet his victims, often targeting those who were trusting and unsuspecting. Investigators found unsettling evidence on his computer, along with items in his home that raised serious concerns. Stephen Lorenzo and his accomplice, Scott Schweikert, had devised a scheme to manipulate and harm their victims. Their actions left a lasting impact on the lives of many and shocked the entire community.
After Mr. Galehouse was killed, his body was wrapped and put on a trailer in the driveway of Mr. Lorenzo's home.
Scott Schweikert, Lorenzo's accomplice, was a middle-aged man from Illinois who shared Lorenzo's sadistic interests. He later cooperated with investigators, providing detailed accounts of how the two planned and carried out their crimes, with Lorenzo taking the lead. Schweikert's testimony became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, as he described the horrifying events that had taken place. A survivor, Albert Perkins, testified about his harrowing experience with Lorenzo. He recounted waking up restrained and unable to call for help. Despite the fear he endured, Albert bravely took the stand to share his story, shedding light on Lorenzo's harmful actions. His testimony was instrumental in exposing the extent of Lorenzo's cruelty and bringing the truth to light. For nearly 20 years, the victims' families waited for justice. Then, in December 2022, Stephen Lorenzo finally admitted to his crimes. At his sentencing hearing, he shocked everyone by welcoming the death penalty.
I'm seeking the death penalty. It's
in my best interest, basically because it's a comfort. The sooner I can fetch myself a new body and come back again.
But the judge, Christopher Sabella, made it clear that his decision had nothing to do with Lorenzo's wishes. "This is the punishment you deserve for these horrific crimes," he declared. Jason Galehouse's mother, Pam Williams, who was battling terminal cancer, confronted Lorenzo in court with raw emotion. "I'm sick to my stomach just having to look at your disgusting face," she told him. Alongside her was Ruth Wachholz, Michael's mother, who had also waited 2 decades for this moment. On February 24, 2023, Stephen Lorenzo was sentenced to death. The courtroom was filled with emotions, relief, grief, and a sense of long overdue justice. Judge Sabella acknowledged the victims' families' pain, saying, "The thing that was consistent in their testimony is that they have been waiting 20 years for justice. Today, that long wait ends."
Ti condanno a morte. That translates to, I sentence you, Mr. Lorenzo, to death.
Though nothing can bring back Jason and Michael, their families can finally find some closure, knowing that the men responsible for their suffering will never harm another soul again. Lorenzo's case exposed a predator driven by cruelty. The next case shows that sometimes the most dangerous individuals aren't just killers. They're ideologues willing to take innocent lives for their own twisted beliefs.
After I found out he's getting the death penalty, I went outside and I hugged my friends and I started crying and I was just glad it was over.
On April 13, 2014, a quiet afternoon in Overland Park, Kansas turned into a scene of horror. Frazier Glenn Miller Jr., an 80-year-old man with a long history of controversial beliefs, tragically carried out an attack outside a Jewish community center and a nearby retirement home. His attack left 3 innocent people dead, none of whom were Jewish, despite his hateful intentions. Miller's path to violence started long before that day. Born in 1940, he once served as a U.S. Army veteran, but later in life, he became involved with divisive and controversial organizations. In the 1980s, he established a group called the White Patriot Party, which promoted exclusionary ideas and beliefs. He even sought public office to share his extreme viewpoints. He even ran for public office, hoping to spread his extreme beliefs. However, his activities eventually led to his arrest in 1987, when authorities found a stockpile of illegal weapons and explosives in his possession. He served time in prison, but never let go of his extremist views. By 2014, Miller was in poor health and believed he was dying. Instead of spending his last years peacefully, he planned a deadly attack. On that fateful April day, he drove to the Jewish Community Center and fired shots at people in the parking lot. He then moved to a nearby retirement home, continuing his rampage. His victims, William Corcoran and his 14-year-old grandson, Reet Underwood, were there for a singing competition. The third victim, Terry Lamano, was visiting her mother. They were Christians, not Jewish, proof that Miller's hatred was as senseless as his crime. After his arrest, Miller showed no guilt and appeared in court in a wheelchair. He shouted hateful slogans and even tried to justify his actions during his trial. The court found him guilty of capital murder and multiple other charges. A Kansas jury sentenced him to death, a punishment he openly accepted, claiming he was proud of what he did and said thank you. Miller remained on death row until May 3, 2021, when he died in prison at the age of 80. Officials stated that his death was due to natural causes. Though his life ended behind bars, the pain he caused to the victims' families remains. The story of Frazier Glenn Miller Jr. is a reminder of the dangers of hate and extremism. Innocent lives were lost because of one man's violent ideology. But in the end, justice prevailed, ensuring that his actions did not go unanswered. Our next case shows that sometimes the motive is even more chilling: senseless cruelty with no reason at all.
His internal life is going to be way worse than whatever he will deal with in this lifetime.
I didn't attend any of the court hearings. I couldn't bear to watch what my grandson endured before he was shot.
On November 11, 2022, 21-year-old Bryce Salter spent his evening at Y Bar and Bistro in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was supposed to be just another night out, but when the evening came to an end, Bryce never made his way home. Hours passed and his family grew concerned. They didn't know that something terrible had happened outside the bar that night. Based on the information the press could gather, authorities were soon involved, and an investigation began into what had taken place. Bryce Salter was a young man full of life, known for his love of sports and fishing. He had a smile that could light up a room, according to his grandmother, Brenda Miles. But in just moments, his life was stolen by Lang, a man who had spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. Lang had been out of prison for only a few months when he managed to obtain a stolen gun. On that tragic night, he used it to take Bryce's life. The murder was brutal and completely unprovoked. He tragically shot and killed Salter. Surveillance footage revealed that Lang approached his car, where he encountered Salter. An argument ensued, during which Lang pointed a gun at Salter's chest, knocking him to the ground. Salter attempted to defend himself, but Lang fired multiple shots, resulting in Salter's death. Bryce's father, Brandon Salter, and other family members struggled to comprehend how someone could be so cruel. But what made the case even more disturbing was Lang's behavior during the trial.
Say surveillance video shows the two men arguing when Lang took out a gun and knocked Stalter to the ground. Stalter fought back, but then Lang shot him.
Lang showed no shame for what he had done. During his sentencing hearing, he laughed as Bryce's family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. He mocked their pain, slumped in his chair, and smirked while Bryce's younger sister, Reese, spoke about how much her brother meant to her. Even after receiving his sentence, a minimum of 100 years in prison, Lang continued to smile. His attitude throughout the trial shocked not only Bryce's family but also the judge, who called Lang's actions senseless, cowardly, and merciless. Despite Lang's disturbing behavior, justice was served. The court handed him a sentence that ensured he would never walk free again. In addition to the 100-year sentence for second-degree murder, Lang received additional time for weapons charges. As the judge announced the verdict, the Salter family clapped with joy as Lang was sentenced.
70 years to a maximum of 100 years. Thank you.
As bailiffs dragged Lang out of the courtroom for his aggressive outbursts, one of Bryce's family members shouted, "How does it feel to know you're going to die in prison?" It was a powerful moment, one that brought a sense of closure to those who had suffered so much. Bryce's father, Brandon, called his son magic and said he had the perfect blend of everything: intelligence, kindness, and charm. His loss left a hole in their hearts that could never be filled. Bryce's sister Reese found the trial to be one of the hardest experiences of her life. Hearing the details of her brother's final moments was devastating, but seeing Lang mock their pain was even worse. In the end, the Salter family found some comfort in knowing that Lang would never harm another person again. While their pain will never fully fade, they could finally say that justice had been served for Bryce. Lang's lack of remorse was gut-wrenching, but what if a killer not only showed no regret but actively mocked the justice system? That's exactly what happened in our next case.
I didn't kill anyone. I'm not spending the rest of my life in prison for something I didn't do.
In 2007, the quiet town of Elyria, Ohio was shattered by a crime that no one saw coming. Dave Kowalczyk, the well-loved owner of Granny D's Pizza, was found murdered, a brutal and calculated act that sent shockwaves through the community. However, the true horror wasn't just in the crime itself, it was in the man behind it. Neil Simpson wasn't just a killer, he was cold, unrepentant, and dangerous. It started when Dave Kowalczyk's body was found in the pizza shop's back room, his hands tied behind his back. Police discovered security footage showing Simpson entering the shop that night. Investigators tracked Simpson to a nearby motel, where he was arrested within 48 hours. As the trial began, his chilling lack of remorse became clear. He didn't just deny his actions, he mocked the very system trying to bring him to justice. Spitting on jurors, hurling profanities, and showing no sign of regret, Simpson proved one thing: he wasn't sorry, and he never would be. From the beginning, the prosecution painted Simpson as a dangerous man. He had a history of trouble, a personality disorder, and a reputation for making reckless decisions. On the night of the murder, he was the leader of the group, the one in control. It was his plan, his decisions, and ultimately his actions that led to Kowalczyk's mourning death. The prosecution argued that the crime was deliberate, not impulsive. Simpson's past made him a threat to society, and they pushed for the death penalty. The defense, however, tried to shift the focus. They claimed his troubled childhood played a role in his actions. They argued that his upbringing shaped him into the man he became, and that should be considered in his sentencing. As the jury delivered their verdict, Simpson's face twisted with rage. Overcome with fury, he did the unthinkable. He spat at the jurors. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as officers swiftly escorted him out. His lawyers, scrambling to salvage the situation, pleaded for a mistrial, but the judge stood firm. 2 hours later, Simpson returned, his demeanor calmer, but his anger still simmering beneath the surface. He turned to the judge and offered an apology, but not to the jury. "I'm not mad at you," he admitted, his voice steady. "I'm mad at them." The courtroom was thick with tension as the jury left to deliberate, when Neil was seeking the death penalty for himself. Hours passed, each minute stretching endlessly for Dave Kowalczyk's family. Would they choose the ultimate punishment? Would Neil Simpson be sent to death row for his brutal crime? After 4 agonizing hours, the jury returned. The room fell silent as Judge Mark Betleski prepared to read the verdict. Kowalczyk's family held their breath. Simpson, appearing through a grainy video feed from jail, sat motionless. His freshly shaven head and cold expression betrayed nothing. Then the words came. Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Due to election by the state of Ohio, on count 2, life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This was justice, but it would never bring Dave back. However, Simpson didn't flinch. No reaction, no shame, just the same blank stare, as if he had already resigned himself to his fate. A life behind bars, with nothing but time to think about the choices that led him there. Though he avoided the death penalty, his defense attorney believed the outcome was worse for him. Life in prison meant no second chances, no hope for freedom. While a death sentence would have given him years of appeals, this verdict left him with only one. His fight for freedom was effectively over. The prosecution stood by the jury's decision, calling it fair and just. The case was closed, and the community could finally move forward. This case is heartbreaking in many ways. A hardworking man lost his life over a senseless crime, leaving his family and loved ones in grief. The trial itself was difficult to watch, especially given Simpson's lack of repentance. While the justice system ensured he would never harm another person again, no sentence could truly make up for the loss of Dave Kowalczyk. His family will carry that pain forever. Neil Simpson may have escaped death row, but he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, alone, with nothing but time to think about what he's done. The next case reveals how a man who was supposed to save lives turned into a cold-blooded murderer.
Meditated that there are any number of cases in which a defendant was sentenced to death in Nebraska where the prior conduct did not rise to the level of disregard this defendant has for the value of the life of another human being.
Anthony Garcia was once a promising medical student, but his career took a dark turn. Instead of saving lives, he ended up taking them. Between 2008 and 2013, he committed 2 separate double murders in Omaha, Nebraska. His victims were connected to his past failures, and his crimes shocked the community. Garcia had a troubling history in the medical field. After earning his degree, he struggled through multiple residencies, often being forced out due to unprofessional behavior. His time at Creighton University Medical Center was particularly disastrous. His professors found him arrogant and irresponsible, and he was eventually dismissed. Dr. William Hunter and Dr. Roger Brumbach, 2 senior figures at Creighton, played key roles in his termination. Years later, Garcia still held a grudge. Unable to build a successful medical career, he blamed those who had dismissed him. Then, in 2008, an unimaginable tragedy struck. On March 13, 2008, Dr. William Hunter returned home to find a horrifying scene. His 11-year-old son, Thomas Hunter, and the family's housekeeper, Shirley Sherman, had been brutally stabbed to death. The attack shook the community, but investigators struggled to find a suspect. Witnesses had seen a heavy-set man in a silver Honda near the home, but the case quickly went cold. For 5 years, the families had no answers. Then, in 2013, the killer struck again. On May 14, 2013, Dr. Roger and Mary Brumbach were found murdered in their home. Roger had been shot multiple times and stabbed, while Mary had been stabbed to death. Once again, knives from the victim's kitchen had been used. Investigators immediately noticed the similarities to the 2008 murders. Their suspicions grew stronger when they discovered an attempted break-in at the home of Dr. Chanda Butra, another former Creighton professor who had classed with Garcia. It became clear that the killer was targeting former colleagues. Detectives began digging deeper into Garcia's background. They discovered that just before the Brumbach's murders, he had purchased a firearm matching the type used in the crime. His credit card records placed him near the crime scene, and his phone had been used to search for the Brumbach address. On July 15, 2013, authorities arrested Garcia while he was driving in Illinois. He was heavily intoxicated, and inside his car, police found a handgun. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder.
Finally, in the fall of 2016, a trial. After 16 days of testimony, a jury found Garcia guilty of all 4 murders.
Garcia's trial began in October 2016. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including DNA, surveillance footage, and even a chilling confession to an acquaintance where he bragged about killing a young boy and an older woman. Garcia showed little emotion throughout the trial, often wearing headphones and appearing uninterested. After weeks of testimony, the jury found him guilty on all counts. In September 2018, a panel of judges sentenced him to death.
Asleep or catatonic. That's how the attorney for revenge killer Anthony Garcia, eyes closed, hands cuffed. He had no reaction, barely any movement during the testimony.
He remained silent and even slept when the judge announced his death penalty. His crimes had been calculated, brutal, and fueled by revenge. The case of Anthony Garcia is a chilling reminder of how bitterness and resentment can turn deadly. Instead of moving on from his failures, he chose to take innocent lives. His victims were people who had once been part of his world, yet he saw them as obstacles rather than human beings. For the families of Thomas Hunter, Shirley Sherman, Roger Brumbach and Mary Brumbach. Justice was served, but their pain remains. No sentence can bring back their loved ones, but at least the man responsible can never harm anyone again. He looked like an ordinary man, but Joel Rifkin's secret life was anything but.
A weird definition of what's crazy and what's legally crazy. Trust me, I was not normal at the time.
In the early 90s, New York was haunted by a quiet, awkward man with a terrifying secret. His name was Joel Rifkin, someone who looked like your average neighbor, but behind that ordinary face was a serial killer. Joel killed at least 9 women, maybe even more. And when he finally spoke about it, what he said in interviews was so cold and emotionless, it left people stunned. A loving family adopted Joel Rifkin as a baby. He struggled with learning disabilities, got bullied in school, and never really fit in. By the time he was an adult, he had dropped out of college and worked as a landscaper. But under all that, something dark was growing. Joel started picking up intimate workers and killing them. His first known victim was Heidi Balch in 1989. Joel brought her to his home, where he took her life and tried to prevent authorities from identifying her by removing her key features. He hid clues in different places, some in forests, some near rivers. For 4 years, he continued his secret activities, with police unaware that one person was responsible for everything. But on June 28, 1993, everything changed. State troopers noticed Joel's pickup truck driving without a license plate. When they tried to stop him, he led them on a high-speed chase. He eventually crashed. What they found in his truck was horrifying: the body of his last victim, Tiffany Bresciani, wrapped in a tarp. That was the end of his freedom. When questioned, Joel Rifkin gave chilling responses. He claimed he never planned the killings, but once he started, he couldn't stop. In interviews, he showed little to no remorse. He explained his crimes as if he were talking about chores, cold, disconnected, and almost casual. What made it worse was his total lack of emotion. No guilt, no sorrow, just facts. In 1994, Joel was found guilty of 9 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 203 years to life in prison.
He knew when he killed Tiffany Bresciani that he was a serial killer. He knew it.
Authorities believed he could be responsible for up to 17 deaths. He was so infamous that prison officials kept him in solitary confinement for over 4 years to avoid chaos among inmates. Years later, during an interview, when asked why he did it, Joel shrugged. He didn't try to blame anyone or justify it. His answers were disturbingly simple: cold logic, no empathy, and even a joke about how long it took to tamper with the body remains. The lack of humanity was terrifying. Rifkin also mentioned chilling and detailed memories of 2 victims known only as Victim 6 and Victim 9. Rifkin recalls what they looked like, how they died, and exactly where he left their bodies. Investigators had long struggled to put names to these women, but Rifkin's precise confessions gave them the missing pieces. Even at his old age, he remembered roads, neighborhoods, even small landmarks. For many watching or reading his interviews, the worst part wasn't the number of victims. It wasn't the method. It was the way he spoke, like human lives meant nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a man listing memories like a grocery list. Joel Rifkin isn't just remembered for his crimes, but for one of the most disrespectful and emotionless interviews with a serial killer of all time. Next is the disturbing case of a killer who couldn't even remember all the lives he destroyed, and didn't seem to care.
Oh man, I loved her. I forget her name. Oh wait, I think it was Ruth.
On a cold evening, a man sat there in a cold prison cell, calmly sketching the faces of women no one had been looking for. Faces of victims he remembered in terrifying detail. Behind that quiet demeanor was the deadliest serial killer in American history. Samuel Little didn't just take lives, he erased them from existence, often targeting those the world had already forgotten. For decades, he moved from state to state, killing with ease, leaving no fingerprints, no traces, just silence. And when he finally spoke, the confessions sent shivers across the nation. Little was born in Reynolds, Georgia in 1940. He had a troubled start. His mother, who struggled through a difficult adolescence, abandoned him. He was raised by his grandmother in Ohio and struggled in school. As a child, he began having dark fantasies, one that would grow into something monstrous. By his young age, he was collecting crime magazines, obsessed with images of women being strangled. That obsession turned into action and soon into a killing spree that lasted over 30 years. Between 1970 and 2005, Samuel traveled across the country, killing women in silence. Most of his victims were marginalized, intimate workers, addicts, and women of color. He knew the system wouldn't look for them. For decades, he slipped through the cracks, even though he was arrested multiple times for crimes like theft and assault. He was never held accountable for his most serious actions. In 2012, everything changed. Little was arrested on a substance charge in Kentucky, and a DNA test linked him to 3 unsolved killings in Los Angeles. That was the break detectives had been waiting for. In 2014, Samuel Little went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA, witness testimonies, and survivor accounts. He was convicted of taking 3 lives and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But here's where things got chilling. From his prison cell, Samuel began to talk. He confessed to dozens of deaths, one after another. And in interviews, he would draw sketches of his victims from memory, smiling, reminiscing as if describing old friends. It wasn't a regret, it was pride. When asked why he killed, Samuel never gave a clear answer. Some say it was about power. Others believed it was his childhood trauma, mixed with deep psychological disorders.
Did you ever shoot any of these girls?
Shoot.
Yeah, with a gun?
I get no kicks out of shooting.
All right, good.
But in his interviews, he showed no guilt or sorrow, only satisfaction. And finally, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In interviews from his prison cell, Samuel looked relaxed, even cheerful. He spoke in detail about how he chose his victims, how he strangled them, and how he left their bodies behind. He laughed, he joked, and at times he seemed proud of what he had done. It was beyond chilling. It was disrespectful to every life he took. Viewers who watched his confessions were stunned, not just by the crimes, but by his total lack of humanity. There were no tears, no apologies, only a man who treated killing like a hobby. The world will never forget his name because his evil exposed the gaps in the justice system and the lives it failed to protect. Next, we uncover a chilling case where the killer treated the woods like his hunting ground and his victims like trophies.
I did it. I'm confessing to a murder on camera.
Gary Michael Hilton, a man whose name still sends chills through families across the Southeast. From Florida to North Carolina, his crimes were brutal, heartless, and cold. He wasn't just a killer. He was a serial killer who preyed on innocent people enjoying peaceful time in national forests. And what's worse, during interviews, his lack of remorse was chilling. It all started in October 2007 when John and Irene Bryant, a retired couple from North Carolina, disappeared while hiking in the Pisgah and Nantahala national forests. These were gentle, kind people, nature lovers just enjoying their golden years. When they didn't return, their family feared the worst, but no one could imagine what happened. As days passed, search teams combed the forests. Then came a horrifying clue: a blood-stained trail and some personal items belonging to the Bryants. Soon after, federal authorities got involved. The FBI, U.S. Forest Service, local sheriffs, and SBI worked together to find the truth. Their hard work finally paid off. Evidence pointed to one man, Gary Michael Hilton, and what followed was a terrifying discovery. Hilton confessed. He admitted he kidnapped and killed Irene Bryant in Pisgah National Forest. Then he used a firearm to kill John Bryant in Nantahala National Forest. What made the situation even darker was that this wasn't his only crime. Hilton had already been sentenced to death in Florida for the killing of Cheryl Dunlap, and he was serving life for killing Meredith Emerson in Georgia. It was clear this man had been hunting innocent people across state lines for years. Hilton's motive was as disturbing as his actions. He targeted hikers and campers, often older victims, and killed them for money.
She almost wet my hands. She damn sure did. I lost control of both of them, both the knife and the bat.
Robbery was just part of it. He stole from his victims after ending their lives in the most violent way possible. Before the interview began, Gary Michael Hilton warned, be prepared for a whole different breed of cat. Throughout the conversation, he showed no guilt, only cold, sometimes sarcastic responses, as he calmly admitted to killing all his victims, leaving investigators sickened. After 17 years of silence, he confessed to the 2007 murder and dismemberment of Cheryl Dunlap, saying it's time, and citing his declining health. A former Army vet and survivalist, Hilton also admitted to murdering John and Irene Bryant in North Carolina and Meredith Emerson in Georgia, victims he stalked in national forests. Though he denied being a psychopath, he admitted, "I have part of a sociopath in me." Journalist David Scott called him one of the most maniacal killers he had ever encountered. In March 2012, Hilton pleaded guilty to the murder of John and Irene Bryant. At his sentencing in U.S. District Court, he received 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 15 years for robbery. The judge made sure his federal sentence would be served after the death and life sentences he was already serving in Florida and Georgia. This ensured that Hilton would never walk free again. But even behind bars, Hilton's behavior was shocking. In interviews, he showed no emotion, no apology, no sign of humanity. He often refused to answer, and when he did, he acted like it was a burden, like the lives he took meant nothing. Law enforcement officials called his interviews some of the most disrespectful they'd ever experienced. Families of the victims were heartbroken. They came to court with photos of their loved ones, clutching onto the last pieces of their memories. But what hurt the most was Hilton's lack of remorse. No tears, no regret, just a monster hiding behind calm words and an empty stare. Our next case dives into the twisted mind of a man who smirks at his victim's pain, even during a confession.
I think these families of these women, they need justice.
Mark Reeby was once just another face in a Florida prison. Convicted for the brutal 1988 killing of a mother named Donna Callahan, he was sentenced to life. But what shocked everyone came just a year later. He started confessing to killing 12 more women. Then, just as suddenly, he took it all back. This back-and-forth game of confession and denial left families devastated and confused. Investigators believed Reeby might be one of the most dangerous serial killers in America. But without solid proof for the other cases, justice seemed out of reach. Police had suspected Reeby long before his confession. Donna Callahan was taken from her workplace in Gulf Breeze, Florida, and never made it home. Reeby's half-brother, Alex Wells, eventually broke down and told investigators what happened. He said he and Reeby kidnapped Donna. Reeby strangled her in the back seat of their car while Donna begged for the life of her little one on the way. They buried her in a shallow grave just 350 yards from Reeby's childhood home. Years later, journalist Piers Morgan sat face-to-face with Reeby in an interview that would soon turn explosive. Piers directly accused him of hiding the truth. He told Reeby he believed he killed those 12 women and that the families deserved answers. But Reeby wasn't having it. He ripped off his mic and stormed out, snapping, "You're wrong. We're done. So why confess, then recant?" Reeby claimed he made a deal with a special agent named Haley to protect his son while in prison. He said Haley promised something in return, but never delivered. He insisted the information he gave was fed to him, and that none of it was true. But not everyone bought that story. Haley, the agent, said Reeby revealed details only the real killer would know.
This point platform. Did you abduct and kill Alan Ray?
Despite the lack of convictions for the other 12 women, police still believe he's behind all those killings. During the interview, Reeby tried to paint a very different picture of himself. He claimed he respected women and would never harm one, but the evidence and his own past words told a different story. Piers kept pushing. "Answer me like a man," he said. Reeby snapped. "I don't believe in putting hands on a woman," he said before walking out. For the families, the pain never ends. They're still waiting for justice, still waiting for the truth. And when someone plays games with life and death, confessing, then denying, it's not just disrespectful, it's cruel. Our next case exposes a man who weaponized trust and manipulated heartbreak, all while putting on a mask of innocence.
This is just searching for random videos. Is there anything specific you said about?
Nothing specific. Is that right?
Yeah.
He seemed like just another lonely man looking for love online. But behind the soft voice and unassuming demeanor was a calculated predator. Stephen Port, nicknamed the Grinder Killer, didn't just hide behind the charm, he weaponized it. What followed was a chilling series of substance use, assaults, and killings so methodical it left even seasoned detectives shaken. In June 2014, 23-year-old Anthony Walgate was found dead outside an apartment building in Barking, London. The man who called it in was the same man who killed him, Stephen Port. He played innocent, telling people he didn't know the man. But that was just the beginning. Over the next year, 3 more men, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor, would be found dead in the same area, all within walking distance of Port's home. Shockingly, authorities didn't connect the dots. Even as victims were found in almost identical poses, police claimed there were no signs of foul play. Stephen even planted a fake suicide note on one of the bodies, blaming the previous victim's death on him. Families cried for answers. A neighbor recalled Stephen acting strange, carrying bottles of clear liquid and bags of white powder. Still, no one was arrested. Vital evidence wasn't tested. Crucial interviews were skipped. It wasn't until Anthony Walgate's death was retried in court that the truth began to surface. Forensic links, witness accounts, and a web of online dating profiles finally unraveled Port's twisted operation. He used social apps to lure his victims, secretly spiking a dangerous substance in their drinks. After taking advantage of their trust, he ended the lives of 4 men and left their bodies behind without remorse, continuing his daily life as if nothing had happened. Stephen Port lived a double life. On one hand, he was a quiet, bus depot chef who appeared on MasterChef. On the other hand, a predator who lied about being an Oxford graduate, a Navy vet, and even a teacher.
I don't recognise his face.
So you don't recognise his face?
I do not know, no.
His motive? Control, power, and complete domination over his victims. He preyed on vulnerability, using charm and lies to gain trust before taking lives. In 2015, Port was arrested. At trial, he denied everything, even as overwhelming evidence mounted. But the jury saw through him. In 2016, he was convicted on all counts: 4 murders, multiple mistreatments, and a list of substance use and assault charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with a whole life order, meaning he will never walk free again. During interviews after his conviction, Stephen showed little emotion, no remorse, no tears. He played the victim, claiming he was misunderstood. His childlike personality made it hard to connect with people. When asked about the men he killed, he deflected. He smiled, he shrugged, he dodged questions. His behavior disgusted everyone. Even officers said they'd never seen someone so disconnected from reality and the pain they caused. For the families, justice came late. They'd begged police to investigate deeper, but were ignored until it was too late. A mother cried as she described her son's laugh. A father broke down, explaining how he knew the suicide note wasn't his boy. And for every unanswered call, every ignored clue, the pain still lingers. Stephen Port wasn't just a killer. He was a manipulator who nearly got away with it. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. Gray Ray Bowles just sat there, cold, calculated, and unapologetic.
I felt all right, you know. There's not really a way to describe it, you know, it's just, I guess, relief.
Gary Ray Bowles, known for the brutal killing spree of multiple women in the 1980s, was convicted of 2 killings. He was sentenced to death, but died in prison before his execution. In the mid-90s, a man known as the I-95 Killer was on a silent rampage. His name, Gary Ray Bowles, a serial killer who targeted and killed 6 men across 6 different states in just 8 months. But what truly shocked people wasn't just the mercilessness of the killing. It was the shocking, disrespectful things he said during interviews that followed his arrest. Gary Bowles faced many challenges in his early life. Born in Virginia and raised in West Virginia, he grew up without a stable home environment. His father passed away before he was born, and his stepfather was abusive. By the age of 13, Gary had experienced enough hardship that he ran away from home. He ended up homeless, struggling to survive, and turned to various ways to make money. Over time, his resentment and pain grew, leading to destructive decisions later in his life. In 1994, police found the body of John Hardy Roberts in Daytona Beach, Florida. Gary had been staying with him. He beat and strangled John before stealing his credit cards and fleeing. When police investigated, they found Gary's fingerprints and parole documents at the scene. That's when the manhunt began. One by one, more bodies started showing up across Maryland, Georgia, and Florida. Each case pointed back to Bowles. The FBI added him to their 10 most wanted list. Finally, on November 22, 1994, Gary Ray Bowles was arrested in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. His final victim was Walter J. Hinton, a man Gary killed by dropping a 40-pound stone on his head and then stuffing a towel down his throat. After being captured, Bowles confessed to all 6 killings. In his interview with police, Gary Bowles made troubling statements, expressing anger and blaming certain individuals for his struggles. He claimed that his life had been negatively impacted by a difficult personal experience and felt that this justified his actions. His reasoning revealed deep feelings of resentment, and he showed no remorse for his actions. In 1996, Gary pleaded guilty to Hinton's murder and was sentenced to death. He later admitted to killing the others as well. At first, the Florida Supreme Court reversed one of his death sentences due to prejudicial comments during the trial, but in 1999, he was resentenced to death. When questioned about his crimes, Gary Ray Bowles spoke with a flat, emotionless tone, describing the killings like they were errands. His cold demeanor offered a disturbing window into his mindset. During interviews, he explained how he lured victims under the guise of companionship before launching brutal attacks. The calm, matter-of-fact way he recounted these events revealed a chilling absence of empathy, providing investigators and psychologists with rare insight into the psyche of a remorseless killer. Our next case dives into the horror inside hospital walls, where a nurse took it upon himself to decide who lived and who died.
Do you consider yourself a sociopath?
Well, that's what most people consider me.
What do you think?
I'm just Donald Harvey.
He looked like any ordinary hospital worker, quiet, polite, and always on time. But behind that calm smile was a man who called himself the Angel of Death. Donald Harvey didn't just take lives, he calculated them. And when he spoke about his victims, it wasn't with regret. It was with eerie calm, as if he were talking about chores. Born in 1952 in Ohio, Donald appeared to be an ordinary person. However, beneath the surface, he was carrying a painful secret. After enduring a difficult childhood and struggling with his sense of self, he dropped out of school and moved between various jobs. Eventually, he began working in hospitals where he found a path that would tragically define his life. Harvey said he killed to ease suffering, but that was just the beginning. He used arsenic, cyanide, insulin, suffocation, even coat hangers, and did things that sounded more like horror movie plots than real life. His victims were mostly elderly cardiac patients, but he didn't stop there. He poisoned his boyfriend's father, and even his neighbors. For nearly 17 years, nobody suspected a thing, until one day in 1987, doctors found cyanide in a patient named John Powell. When police questioned Harvey, he confessed, but only to one killing at first. That changed quickly. His court-appointed lawyer knew they needed to act fast to avoid the death penalty, so Harvey made a deal. He confessed to everything if they took execution off the table. And what he revealed was shocking. At least 37 victims were confirmed, but Harvey claimed it could be over 70. Harvey claimed he was helping people by putting them out of their misery. But the truth was far darker. He openly admitted that many of the killings were driven by anger and a need for control. And at times he even enjoyed it. In one interview, he smirked while describing his methods, laughing as he spoke about the number of lives he had taken. His tone, his expressions, everything about him showed a complete lack of remorse. In 1987, Donald Harvey was sentenced to 28 life sentences. He spent the rest of his life behind bars at Toledo Correctional Institution, and even there, he couldn't escape judgment. In interviews, Harvey spoke casually, like he was chatting about the weather, not dozens of killings. His tone, his body language, it was eerie. He didn't just avoid apologizing, he bragged. When asked if he regretted it, he shrugged. He claimed he was helping people. but you could see the smugness on his face. It was one of the most disrespectful interviews ever seen from a serial killer. Harvey also explains in detail the methods, which included poisoning patients with substances, suffocating them, or tampering with their medical equipment. He described how he often acted alone, exploiting his position in the hospital to carry out the murders without immediate suspicion. Harvey's confessions were instrumental in helping authorities understand the extent of his crimes, leading to his conviction for multiple murders. For the families, the pain never faded. People trusted hospitals to heal, not to kill. It made your stomach turn. There was no apology, no regret, just a man who found power in taking lives and had the nerve to smile while talking about it. In 2017, after decades in prison, Harvey was beaten to death by a fellow inmate. A quiet end for a man who caused so much pain, but to many, not nearly enough justice for what he did. The next case reveals a cold-blooded serial killer, where women were targeted by a man who walked among us, hiding in plain sight.
What these women made me angry or pushed enough to do to make me hurt them?
Some criminals hide their evil behind charm. Some wear it like a badge. Lorenzo Jerome Gilliard Jr., known as the Kansas City Strangler, did just that. And when he was finally caught, his courtroom behavior and cold, disrespectful interview made it clear. This man had no remorse for the horror he caused. Born in 1950, Gilliard seemed like any ordinary boy growing up in Missouri. But beneath the surface, there was something dark. As a teen, he bullied smaller kids, skipped school, and failed to show any respect for rules. By the time he was young, he had a wife, a child, and a record. His early crimes involved assault and mistreatment, but again and again, he slipped through the system. Charges were dropped, witnesses changed stories. He apologized and walked free. But the horror didn't stop. Between 1977 and 1993, women started disappearing in Kansas City. Most were young, vulnerable, and many were intimate workers. Their bodies would later be found strangled, assaulted, and left like trash. For years, the cases went cold. No solid leads. No clear suspect. That changed in 2001. With new DNA technology, police revisited old cases. And what they found shocked them. A blood sample taken from Gilliard back in 1987 was a match for multiple killings. In 2004, Gilliard was finally arrested and charged with 12 counts of murder. He acted calm, cold, unshaken. Even as the evidence stacked against him, DNA, patterns, timelines, he denied everything. In court, prosecutors revealed how all his victims were strangled, left barefoot, assaulted, and dumped in isolated places. Still, Gilliard showed no emotion. His motive? It was never clear. Was it power? Control? Hate? Maybe he thought no one would care about the women he targeted. But what made it worse was his complete disrespect towards the victims, their families, and even the justice system. He was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
You've never met her, you said?
I never met her. I don't know. I just truly don't know.
In interviews, he refused to admit guilt. He acted smug, smirking at questions. When asked about the DNA evidence, he shrugged it off. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he express regret. Even when asked about his victims, Gilliard coldly claimed, "I don't know anything about them." When questioned about his attorney, he lied, saying he didn't know who that was either. Eventually, mid-interview, he abruptly stood up and walked out, ending the conversation saying, "Have a good day, thank you." Gilliard looked the camera dead in the eye and claimed he was innocent. When pressed further, he smirked and said, "People want to believe what they want. I'm just living." Imagine hearing that if you were a mother, a sister, or a daughter of one of his victims. The pain, the disrespect, it's chilling. Gilliard didn't just kill, he erased lives, and then acted like he didn't care. Lorenzo Gilliard was condemned not only for the cruelty of his crimes, but for the heartless, arrogant way he responded after being caught. Our next case is straight from a nightmare, where a man kidnapped, mistreated, and killed his victims in unspeakable ways. In Kansas City, Missouri, during the mid-1980s, a quiet man named Robert Berdella appeared to live a normal life. He owned a local shop and was seen by many as a helpful neighbor. But beneath the surface, he was hiding a terrifying secret. Known later as the Kansas City Butcher and the Collector, Berdella was leading a double life that shocked the entire community. What made Berdella so disturbing wasn't just what he did, it was how carefully he hid it. He targeted young men, lured them into his home, and kept them there against their will. His house on 4315 Charlotte Street became the center of a chilling story. While neighbors went about their daily lives, something unimaginable was happening just next door. The truth came to light in 1988, when a man named Chris Bryson managed to escape from Berdella's house. He ran for help, and soon the police arrived. Inside the home, investigators uncovered a mountain of evidence that left them stunned. Journals, photographs, and physical evidence told a story that Berdella had kept hidden for years. When questioned, Berdella spoke without emotion. He talked about his actions as if they were everyday events. He even admitted that his inspiration came from a fictional movie character. His calm explanations made the case even more chilling for investigators. When asked about why he did what he did, Berdella said it was about power and control. He wasn't after money or revenge. His actions came from a deep desire to dominate others, which he believed gave him a sense of importance. He had modeled his behavior after a disturbing film, blurring the lines between fiction and reality in the worst way. Instead of going to trial, Berdella chose to plead guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He never expressed any remorse or gave apologies to the victims' families. He remained cold and distant until the very end.
The media has so biased my case, portraying me as being non-human.
Even in prison, Berdella avoided taking full responsibility. During interviews, he often acted dismissive and even blamed the media for exaggerating his actions. He refused to acknowledge the impact he had on so many lives, which only deepened the pain for the families affected. Robert called himself a sensitive citizen who just made mistakes, claiming the media made him out to be a villain. At his flea market booth, Bob's Bizarre Bazaar, he sold oddities, antiques, occult books, and even displayed skulls. During Kansas City's Final Four weekend, he placed 4 skulls in the window with a sign, "The Final Four." He later scoffed at media rumors that he made the jewelry from his victims' bones, saying, "That's not true." For the victims' families, the pain was immeasurable. Their loved ones had been taken away from them in a way that was hard to comprehend. That was almost as painful as the crime itself. In 1992, Berdella passed away in prison from natural causes, but the trauma he left behind still echoes today as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones no one suspects. Our next case is about pure evil, where a woman disguised as a sweet grandmother poisoned her loved ones without guilt.
Days of not knowing where you are or what you've done.
She was a grandmother, a churchgoer, a caretaker. She was a Southern grandma, but behind that soft voice and kind smile was a cold-blooded killer. Velma Barfield wasn't just a serial killer. She was the first woman executed in the U.S. after capital punishment returned in 1976. Velma was born in North Carolina in 1932. Her early life was painful. She claimed her father mistreated her, and her mother never stepped in. She married young, had 2 kids, and seemed like a normal housewife. But after a surgery and some chronic pain, her behavior changed. She became addicted to prescription substances, and eventually, something inside her snapped. Her first husband died in a mysterious house fire. Her second, dead within a year. Then her mother fell sick and passed after strange vomiting spells. Velma's employers began dying one after the other, always with the same symptoms: nausea, vomiting, and sudden death. Eventually, when her boyfriend Roland Taylor died, an autopsy revealed poison in his system. Velma was arrested, and when police started digging, her dark story began to unravel. She confessed to 6 killings, killing her mother, 2 employers, her boyfriend, and others by secretly poisoning their food or drinks. The real shock came during her interviews. Calm, polite, almost cheerful. She spoke about killings like she was reading a recipe. At one point, she smiled and said, "I just didn't want them to suffer anymore." Her motive? Mostly to cover up her forged checks and lies. Sometimes, it was just because the person became inconvenient. She claimed her substance addiction clouded her judgment, but that didn't explain the careful planning behind each poisoning. Velma was tried and convicted for just 1 killing, but everyone knew the number was higher. She spent 6 years on death row.
I'm sorry for the hurt that I've caused so many people.
During her final interviews, she remained oddly at peace. She didn't cry, but even her last words were soft. "I'm sorry for the pain I've caused." She said substance use was what ultimately led her to prison, claiming it influenced her to commit those crimes. She also claimed to have found religion and began ministering to other inmates. While she said she grew closer to God behind bars, many believed it was just another mask she wore. How could someone so gentle-looking, so calm, commit such an evil act? Some saw her as a broken woman shaped by trauma. Others saw her as manipulative, using her appearance to hide her crimes. Either way, Velma Barfield's interviews remain among the most unsettling ever recorded because they remind us, evil doesn't always look the way you expect. She was trusted to save lives. Instead, Kimberly Clark Sains used her position to end them. In 2008, patients at a Texas dialysis clinic started dying under strange circumstances. One by one, people who came in for routine care were collapsing. Families were left in shock, doctors were confused, and no one could explain what was happening. Until one name kept coming up: Kimberly Clark Sains. Kimberly was a licensed practical nurse at the DeVita Dialysis Clinic in Lufton, Texas. On paper, she seemed like a caring medical professional, but behind closed doors, she had a history of substance addiction and mistreatment, had been fired from multiple jobs, and had even been caught stealing painkillers. And yet, she was still hired to care for patients who depended on life-saving treatment. However, in April 2008, things took a terrifying turn. That month alone, 30 emergency calls were made from the clinic, more than the previous year. Patients were having heart attacks and their blood pressure would crash suddenly, and several of them died. Paramedics began to raise concerns. Something was clearly wrong. After 2 patients died on the same day, DeVita sent an internal coordinator to the clinic to investigate. But even under watch, people kept getting sick. Then came the turning point. 2 patients, Marva Rohn and Carolyn Rissinger, collapsed right in front of witnesses. One of those witnesses saw something horrifying. Kimberly was seen doing something unusual with the dialysis machine, which raised concerns. The bucket she used and the syringes were found to contain traces of bleach. Kimberly said she was cleaning a machine, but the way she did it wasn't allowed by company rules. The clinic was temporarily closed and authorities began an investigation. Eventually, it was discovered that her actions had put patients' lives in danger. Forensic teams discovered that Kimberly had been present every single time a patient had coded or died. When they searched her computer, they found searches like "Can bleach kill you?" and "Bleach injection death." She even mentioned bleach before the detectives brought it up. Her digital trail betrayed her.
Let's go backwards to Clark Goldband. I want to hear the facts. Who is this woman? She's what, in her 30s?
Investigators brought in a scientist from the CDC to help with the case. After testing blood samples, he found a rare chemical marker that appears only when certain cleaning agents enter the bloodstream. This marker showed that something harmful had affected the patient's blood, leading to serious health problems. It was the evidence they needed to confirm what had happened. But why would a nurse do this? Co-workers said Kimberly hated some of the patients. Others said she was overwhelmed, battling addiction, and hated her job. Some believed she wanted attention or was trying to act like a hero in a crisis she created. Whatever the reason, she played with lives like they meant nothing.
With bleach, 10 dialysis patients with bleach, 5 of them died as a result, Nancy. 5 others were injured in one terrifying case.
In 2012, Kimberly Clark Sains was convicted of killing 5 patients and trying to kill 5 more. She was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, plus 60 extra years. However, she had no shame for her act.
And here's the thing, this wasn't her first time at the rodeo rather.
Prosecutors believed there were even more victims, but they couldn't collect enough evidence to pursue further charges. During sentencing, the daughter of one of the victims stood up and said, "You are nothing more than a psychopathic serial killer. I hope you burn in hell." Today, Kimberly is locked away in a Texas prison, but the pain she caused still lingers. Families came to the clinic for healing, and instead, they found heartbreak. This case is a chilling reminder that sometimes evil wears a nurse's uniform. Our next case explores how a nurse's steady hands became the tools of a silent, calculated death.
I don't know, maybe it's my heart making me think it, I don't know, but I just keep thinking that something caught on fire and the smoke wouldn't allow him to wake up or something, and then the fire.
It was a quiet day in Morgantown, West Virginia, when tragedy struck the Michael family. On what seemed like a regular day in 2005, flames engulfed a family home on Killarney Drive. But what fire crews found inside was not just destruction, it was horror. The lifeless, burned body of Jimmy Michael lay in the ashes. His wife, Michelle Michael, a local nurse, claimed it was all an accident. But soon, the truth would unravel in a story that shocked the entire nation. Michelle told investigators she had no idea what happened. She had gone to work at Ruby Memorial Hospital and returned to find her home burned to the ground. But something didn't sit right with authorities. The fire looked suspicious, and what they'd find out next was even more disturbing. Jimmy Michael hadn't just died in the fire, he'd been killed. Investigators dug deeper. It turned out Michelle had access to a surgical substance called rocuronium, a powerful muscle relaxer used in medical procedures. Evidence showed she had injected her husband while he was in bed, paralyzing him.
I don't, gosh, go to jail, go forever, for life. I don't, you know.
Moreover, investigators revealed Jimmy was completely awake, unable to move as Michelle set the fire around him. He remained conscious for up to 16 minutes while the room burned, after Michelle set the fire and left for work. Police uncovered surveillance footage showing Michelle's car leaving the hospital parking lot at the same time the fire was reignited. Witnesses near the home said they saw her pulling out of the driveway around the same time smoke was first seen. The evidence was piling up, and the story was unraveling fast. Michelle finally admitted she had been having an affair, but denied killing her husband. She said she only lied to cover up the relationship. However, prosecutors believed there was more to the story. They suggested that Michelle might have been influenced by a large life insurance policy worth a significant amount of money. Coming from a traditional background and facing personal struggles, she may have felt overwhelmed by the situation, leading her to make a terrible choice. In 2007, a jury convicted Michelle Michael of first-degree murder and arson. She was sentenced to life in prison. Even now, nearly 20 years later, she's trying to get a new trial, claiming her original lawyer didn't do enough.
Michael's defense has until March to file all the necessary paperwork in an attempt to get her a new trial. From there, the state will have until August 2024 to respond.
But for now, she remains behind bars at Lakin Correctional Center, not eligible for parole until June 2nd, 2027. The heartbreak of this case lies not only in the brutal way Jimmy was killed, but in the betrayal. A wife, a nurse, someone sworn to protect and care, turned into the very source of pain. And as Jimmy lay helpless and aware, it wasn't just fire that consumed that bedroom. It was trust, love, and everything they once were. Our next case is pure merciless, where a nurse crossed a different line, killing not for control, but for twisted redemption.
Do you feel a sense of relief?
Yes, and now I know that it wasn't God, and I'm ashamed of myself that happened, but I also think that it was.
It started like any other shift in a long-term care home. The patients were elderly, fragile, and in need of constant care. But no one expected that the very person meant to protect them was slowly ending their lives. Between 2007 and 2016, Elizabeth Wetlaufer, a registered nurse in Ontario, Canada, became one of the country's most shocking serial killers. She didn't use a knife or a gun. Her weapon? Insulin. For nearly a decade, Wetlaufer worked in various care homes. On the surface, she seemed like a normal nurse, troubled but kind to the residents, or so people thought. Behind closed doors, Elizabeth was struggling. She battled substance mistreatment, depression, and dark thoughts, but what no one realized was that those thoughts were slowly turning deadly. She began injecting elderly patients with insulin. Sometimes it was just enough to harm, other times enough to kill, and said that she's giving them vitamin shots. For years, no one connected the dots. Patients were elderly, many already near the end of life. Their deaths didn't raise alarms. However, Elizabeth knew what she was doing. She confessed that she chose the most vulnerable people, those with dementia, the lonely, the weak.
That I identified with God telling me, this is what, and this is how you work for me.
It wasn't until 2016 that everything unraveled. She entered rehab and, in a surprising turn, confessed to staff there that she had killed multiple people. Staff notified the police, and soon, a full investigation began. Police were stunned. She admitted everything, killing 8, 6 more attempts. She even gave names and dates and wrote a full confession by hand. The confession was deeply unsettling. Elizabeth spoke about intense feelings she called surges that seemed to overwhelm her. She described it as if something was pushing her to act in ways she didn't understand. She said she tried to resist and even confided in a pastor and a lawyer, but they didn't take her seriously. In one haunting moment, she described laughing after a killing. Not real laughter, but something deep inside her, like a cackle from the pit of hell. Elizabeth didn't kill for money, revenge, or fame. She claimed it was about control, something inside her that wanted to end suffering. Also, she admitted she knew what she was doing was wrong. In her own words, it was either God or the devil that told her to do it. But no matter what she believed, the result was the same. 14 victims harmed, 8 of them gone forever. In 2017, Elizabeth pleaded guilty to all charges. She didn't fight it. She was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. However, she showed no emotion for what she did.
I think she's sick. Literally sick. She needs help. She's a sick person, and she's lost in this world.
That means she won't even be eligible for release until 2041, and even then, it's unlikely she'll ever walk free again.
Is feisty.
Was she?
Yeah. She didn't hurt the nurses or anything. She's just very outspoken and feisty, and one night she said, I'm going to die tonight.
She was sent to a high-security facility to receive treatment. Her nursing license was permanently revoked. The disciplinary board called her case the most disgraceful they had ever seen.
If you think 1950s Leave It to Beaver sort of image in your head, that's kind of the image that would be portrayed.
Families were left heartbroken, stunned that someone they trusted had betrayed them so deeply. The victims were parents, war veterans, teachers, and people who had lived full lives, only to be robbed of their final moments by someone meant to care for them. Elizabeth Wettlaufer didn't just break the law. She broke the bond of trust between caregivers and families across the nation. And for that, no sentence will ever feel like enough. Our next case reveals how a woman was denied, manipulated, and her life destroyed, all behind a fake smile.
That we as a society both trusted and trained how to use medicine. We gave her specialized knowledge, and she used it not negligently in her hospital, but intentionally in her home.
In a quiet Alabama neighborhood, a man vanished without a trace. His family grew terrified, and his wife remained calm, almost too calm. Behind the doors of an ordinary home, a deadly secret was hidden. A husband had been poisoned, a nurse had crafted a plan, and a young daughter was caught at the center of the storm. What happened to Jim Capello was not a tragic accident. It was a calculated act of darkness, carried out by someone with years of medical training and a hidden motive no one expected. On an ordinary day in September 2018, Jim's friends and family quickly sensed something was off. He wasn't the type to just vanish. Jim was reliable, always in touch, but what truly raised eyebrows was his wife, Nikki. She didn't report him missing and didn't seem concerned, and her strange behavior only deepened the growing suspicion. The police began their search, and not long after, Jim's lifeless body was discovered.
And she began driving to their South Huntsville home. Henderson testified when she got to the house, it was already taped off, swarmed with police.
His cause of death was insulin poisoning, but Jim wasn't diabetic. He had no reason to have insulin in his system. Investigators looked deeper and found something even more disturbing. Nikki, a registered nurse at the time, had access to insulin and the medical knowledge to use it fatally. The evidence pointed clearly in one direction. This wasn't an accident. It was planned to kill.
However, the lead prosecutor says Capello shows no actual signs of remorse.
Prosecutors revealed that Nikki had poisoned her husband, likely believing no one would suspect a nurse, a mother, and a wife. But her plan quickly unraveled when family members made an unannounced visit to the house. In a panic, she attempted to move Jim's body. However, it was already too late. A friend she called for help refused to get involved. From there, the truth began to surface, and soon, Nikki was arrested and charged with murder. While a clear motive wasn't publicly confirmed, many close to the case believed there were growing tensions in their marriage. Financial stress, personal issues, and resentment may have pushed Nikki to commit the unthinkable.
Sister Jamie tells me Nikki is grasping at straws and that request was expected. Capello's defense team requested a new trial, arguing there was not enough evidence.
In July 2022, Nikki Capello was sentenced to life in prison. However, she chose to remain stone-faced and emotionless. Prosecutor Tim Duthett said it best: "We rarely meet someone truly unrepentant and evil. This was one of those times." Now, Nikki will spend the rest of her life behind bars. A civil lawsuit may follow as Jim's family continues fighting for justice. And Jim's daughter, Riley. Jim's sister, Jamie Wiest, who now has full custody of Riley, said something that broke hearts. She almost got away with it, but Jamie refused to give up. She was determined to find her brother, and she did. Our next case is pure dread. It reveals how a tragic error takes an innocent life.
And were emotional in saying that they believed Vaught deserved a second chance.
Knowing my mom, the way my mom was and stuff, she wouldn't want to see her pull no jail time. But, that's just...
On December 27, 2017, at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, what was supposed to be a routine procedure turned into a tragedy. A 75-year-old woman named Charlene Murphy was admitted for a brain condition and needed a sedative to help her relax. But what she received instead would lead to one of the most controversial criminal trials in modern healthcare history. Charlene was supposed to get a dose of Versed, a commonly used sedative. Instead, nurse Redonda Vaught accidentally gave her Vecuronium, a powerful paralyzing agent used in surgeries. Within minutes, Charlene couldn't breathe. She went into cardiac arrest and never recovered. Everyone knew it was a mistake, but the question that haunted the courtroom for years was it just a mistake, or was it a crime? When the case went to court, the story made headlines across the country. Nurses, doctors, and healthcare workers filled the courtroom in support of Redonda. Many wore their scrubs in quiet protest, fearing that if she was convicted, anyone in the medical field could go to prison for a mistake on the job.
Redonda Vaught recklessly ignored everything that she learned in school and everything that this pen represents.
However, prosecutors didn't see it as a simple error. They argued that Redonda bypassed multiple safety checks, ignored system alerts, and carelessly pulled the wrong substance from an electronic cabinet. They said this wasn't a moment of confusion. It was a series of poor decisions that led to a patient's death. After 4.5 years of legal delays, jury selection, and trial testimony, the verdict came in. Redonda Vaught was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide and mistreatment of an impaired adult, and sentenced to 3 years. Her face stayed calm, but her future had changed forever. The courtroom was silent, divided between heartbroken family members and supportive nurses.
Vanderbilt nurse sentenced this afternoon to 3 years of supervised probation.
As she listens, tears shed from her eyes. The final sentencing is expected in May, with up to 8 years of prison time possible.
I am forever and will be haunted by my role in her untimely passing.
Unlike other criminal trials, there was no talk of revenge or personal gain. Redonda didn't intend harm. She even admitted her mistake early on and showed genuine concern for Charlene's family. But the prosecution said intention doesn't erase responsibility, and that her negligence still cost a life.
Having issues which forced Redonda to override the normal safeguards. Vaught's defense attorney argues there are multiple people to blame for this death, but she is getting all the blame.
As a result of this negligence, Redonda lost her nursing license and now faces years behind bars.
They're showing their support for former Vanderbilt nurse Redonda Vaught. She was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide for giving a patient a fatal dose of...
Redonda addressed fellow healthcare workers after the trial, saying, "Don't let this defeat you. Keep doing your work with honesty. Hold on to your standards." His crime was so brutal, it brought back the federal death penalty. Daniel Lewis Lee stood at the center of national controversy.
This sentence has done nothing except cause our family more pain and more grief.
On a cold January day in 1996, William Frederick Mueller, a gun dealer from Arkansas, was at home with his wife Nancy and her 8-year-old daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Powell. Unbeknownst to them, two men were secretly watching their every move with harmful intentions. These men, Chevy Kehoe and Daniel Lewis Lee, were driven by extremist beliefs and planning to target the family for their valuables. Daniel Lewis Lee had a history of criminal activity. He had been involved in a serious crime years earlier and later became associated with a dangerous extremist group. Alongside Kehoe, he targeted the Mueller family, believing they had money and valuable firearms. Kehoe and Lee traveled from Washington to Arkansas, disguised as law enforcement officers, and waited for the Muellers to return home. Once inside, they restrained William and Nancy before questioning young Sarah about the location of their valuables. They took $50,000 in cash, gold, and valuables from the house, but their crimes didn't stop there. They wanted to leave no trace behind, so they restrained the family and ensured they couldn't call for help. Afterward, they transported the victims 45 miles away to a remote swamp, where they attempted to conceal any evidence of their actions. For his part in the crime, Lee received a few $1,000s and a pistol. The two men continued their extremist activities, but justice was already closing in on them. Authorities eventually arrested Kehoe in 1997, and Lee was caught soon after. When the bodies of the Mueller family were discovered, the horrific truth of what had happened to them became clear. Because the murders were part of a larger criminal organization, the case became a federal matter. Prosecutors sought the death penalty for both men. However, in a surprising turn, Kehoe, the mastermind, was sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, Daniel Lewis Lee, the accomplice, was sentenced to death. Nancy's mother, Earlene Branch Peterson, has asked U.S. President Donald Trump to grant mercy for Daniel Lewis Lee, who is scheduled to die on December 9th. She also said that executing him would not honor her daughter's memory. Lee spent over 20 years on death row, fighting to have his sentence overturned, but the government was determined to carry it out. After multiple delays, his execution was finally scheduled for July 13, 2020. Just hours before Lee was supposed to be executed, a judge temporarily halted it, citing unresolved legal issues. However, the Supreme Court quickly overturned the ruling, and the execution was set. Lee maintained his innocence, stating, "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a murderer. You're killing an innocent man." On July 14, 2020, at 8:07 a.m., Daniel Lewis Lee was put to death by lethal injection. His final words were chilling. "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a murderer. You're killing an innocent man." Lee's execution marked the first federal execution in 17 years. Despite protests and legal battles, the government carried out the sentence, bringing an end to one of the most controversial cases in recent history. The case of Daniel Lewis Lee raises many questions about justice and fairness. If he was truly guilty, did he deserve the death penalty while the mastermind behind the crime was spared? And if he was innocent, as he claimed until his last breath, did the justice system fail him?
Move the execution until after it's not a danger to the family, or to drop the charges and lower it to just life without parole.
For the Mueller family's loved ones, the pain of losing them will never fade. But for those who opposed Lee's execution, his death only added another layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking story. Behind the mask of a nurse was a man quietly ending lives. Charles Cullen and his horrifying trail of death.
Why is that, Charlie?
Because I injected him with a medication called digoxin.
Hospitals are meant to be places of healing, where doctors and nurses work tirelessly to care for patients. But for over 16 years, one man misused his medical knowledge in a way that brought harm instead of help. Charles Cullen, a nurse in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, murdered his patients in cold blood. He worked in multiple hospitals, slipping through the cracks of the healthcare system, and went undetected for years. By the time he was finally caught in 2003, it was too late. He had already taken dozens, even hundreds of innocent lives. Cullen began his deadly spree in 1988 at St. Barnabas Hospital, where he administered a lethal overdose to a patient. When the hospital staff started investigating strange deaths, he quietly resigned and moved on to another hospital. This pattern repeated itself for years. Each time concerns were raised, he would simply secure employment elsewhere. The absence of thorough background screenings and effective reporting systems in medical facilities enabled him to carry out his actions without detection. His actions were deeply troubling. He administered unauthorized medications that put patients at risk. Many of his victims were elderly or already in critical condition, making their passing seem natural. Even when patients or their families raised concerns, their suspicions were often overlooked. In one chilling incident, a 91-year-old cancer patient at Warren Hospital claimed a sneaky male nurse had injected her with something while she was asleep. She died the next day. Her son protested, but the hospital ignored his concerns. Cullen had passed a lie detector test, so they let him continue working. Even when suspicions arose, hospitals were reluctant to take legal action for fear of lawsuits. It wasn't until he started working at Somerset Medical Center in 2002 that the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Nurse Amy Loughran, one of Cullen's co-workers, grew suspicious of his behavior. She noticed that he accessed the medical records of patients who weren't under his care and requested unnecessary medications. She reported her concerns to the police, and they launched a full-scale investigation.
Well into the hundreds of how many people he not only tried to kill, but probably did murder.
Authorities found that his early life was marked by severe hardship, tragedy, and instability. His father died before his first birthday, and his mother's fatal car crash left him orphaned at 17. Bullied at school and struggling with mental illness, he sought solace in nursing, where his dark urges later emerged. Authorities put Cullen under surveillance and gathered enough evidence to arrest him. On December 12, 2003, when questioned, Cullen admitted to killing at least 40 patients, though experts believe the number could be as high as 400. In 2004, Cullen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. In court, he showed no remorse and even taunted the judge during his sentencing. He was ultimately given 18 consecutive life sentences, making him ineligible for parole until the year 2403. He remains in prison to this day, but instead of saying something, he chooses to remain silent. Cullen claimed he killed patients to end their suffering, but many of his victims were on the path to recovery before he took their lives. He said, "I'm sorry for what I did, but like I said, I don't know if I would have stopped."
Are you sorry what you did?
Yes. But like I said, I don't know if I would have stopped.
His case exposed shocking flaws in the hospital system, prompting new laws in New Jersey and Pennsylvania to improve patient safety and background checks for medical workers. Charles Cullen was supposed to care for his patients, but instead, he became their worst nightmare. The idea that a trusted nurse could turn into a serial killer is horrifying. While Cullen is locked away forever, his case serves as a chilling reminder that even those in positions of trust can hide dark secrets. Our next case is driven by pure anger. A man killed inside a prison.
It's a lot of people that wanted to be here that had to work. This courtroom would have been filled up. You can see it from behind me, the love that my child had.
On the morning of October 21st, 2022, Green Bay Correctional Institution became the scene of a brutal and senseless act of violence. It started as a routine day until Joshua Skolman turned it into a nightmare. Skolman, a 40-year-old inmate, was already serving a 51-year sentence for a tragic drunk driving accident in 2006 that claimed 3 lives. But that morning, tensions escalated. As inmates were released from their cells for medical distribution, Skolman suddenly confronted 25-year-old Timothy Neighbors Jr. using a sharp object he had made from a bed frame. But he wasn't finished. After attacking Neighbors, Skolman then turned his attention to another inmate, 26-year-old Lamont Washington. He chased Washington down the stairwell, attempting to stab him as well. Guards quickly intervened, using pepper spray to subdue him. Prison staff soon realized the extent of the damage. Neighbors had collapsed, bleeding heavily. Despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced brain dead 6 days later. Washington, however, managed to escape with only minor injuries. As investigators looked further into Skolman's background, they uncovered troubling information. Before the incident, Skolman had been under scrutiny for involvement in discriminatory activities. He had written multiple letters expressing interest in joining a prison gang, and as part of their initiation, he was expected to target another inmate.
Our record is obviously incredibly aggravated. It's concerning. The defendant has previously to this case killed 3 people.
A year later, in December 2023, a letter written by Skolman revealed his true motives. He admitted that he did not personally know Neighbors or Washington. He had targeted them based on prejudice. The letter contained discriminatory language and harmful rhetoric. When the case went to trial, Skolman's attorney attempted to argue that he was not guilty due to a mental disease or defect, but the jury didn't believe it. After 4 days of testimony, they found him guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and attempted homicide, both classified as discrimination. On sentencing day, the courtroom was tense. The judge handed down the ultimate punishment, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, Skolman received an extra 15 years for attempted homicide, to be served consecutively. However, he showed no shame for his act and smiled over his sentence. He will never be released. He will never have the chance to harm another person again. And in the end, justice was served. This case was a chilling reminder of the dangers that still exist, even behind bars. It wasn't just an act of violence. This act shattered the family of the victim. Our next case is one of brutal betrayal. A man who took the lives of those who had welcomed him into their home.
Your life is not over. You are breathing air and you are on borrowed time. My dad is dead.
Thomas Knuff was convicted of murdering his longtime friend, John Mann, and Mann's girlfriend, Regina Capobianco, in Ohio in 2017. He was sentenced to death for the brutal killings. In 2017, a quiet neighborhood in Ohio became the backdrop for a horrific crime. It all started with an unusual friendship, one that began behind prison walls. Thomas Knuff, a career criminal, had spent years exchanging letters with Regina Capobianco, a fellow inmate. By 2017, both had been released. Regina had completed her sentence, while Thomas, who had recently been paroled after serving time for aggravated robbery. Regina welcomed Thomas into her home, which she shared with her longtime boyfriend, John Mann. But what started as a simple living arrangement soon turned into a deadly competition for a place to stay. Thomas and Regina quickly realized a serious problem, a roommate dispute. Due to their probation terms, they couldn't live under the same roof. John was forced to choose between them. Thomas tried to solve the issue by offering to pay for Regina to stay in a hotel, but she refused. She had been with John for years and wasn't going to leave her home for someone she barely knew. Arguments turned heated, and then on the night of May 11th, 2017, everything took a tragic turn. Thomas grabbed a knife and attacked Regina, stabbing her 6 times. John tried to stop him, but Thomas turned the knife on him, stabbing him 15 times. Within minutes, both Regina and John lay lifeless in their own home. Thomas wrapped their bodies in blankets, hiding them beneath piles of trash. Then he vanished. At first, Thomas had no plan. He told different stories about how he injured his finger, blaming everything from a bar fight to substance dealers breaking in. But as time passed, he realized he needed to get rid of the evidence. The problem? The bodies started to decompose, and the smell became unbearable. Neighbors complained about the stench.
And we had been looking around the house all this time when they were dead in the house.
When police first checked the house, they assumed the foul odor came from rotting meat left in the kitchen. They threw it away and left without realizing that 2 bodies were still inside. But the smell lingered. Worried, Thomas sat in jail on burglary charges and wrote a letter to a friend, asking them to burn the house down. He even told his girlfriend, Alicia Stoner, a former prison worker who had been fired over their secret relationship, to buy him garbage bags, power tools, and a table saw. He wanted to get rid of the bodies, just like a scene from the TV show Dexter. Luckily, his plan failed. Regina's sister refused to accept her sudden disappearance. When police didn't find anything suspicious during their first search, she decided to take matters into her own hands. On June 21st, 2017, she entered the house. The moment she stepped inside, the overwhelming stench confirmed her worst fears. She called the police. This time, officers searched every inch of the home, and in the bedroom, they found Regina's skull. The truth was finally exposed. He insisted he wasn't responsible, claiming he only killed John in self-defense after witnessing him stab Regina. But the evidence told a different story. The crime scene was described as something out of a horror movie, and Thomas had gone to extreme lengths to hide what he had done. At his sentencing, Judge Dina Calabrese didn't hold back. She said she had never seen someone with so little remorse. The crime was so brutal that she needed Vicks Vapor Rub just to stand inside the house. Thomas Knuff was sentenced to death. However, when Thomas Knuff was arrested, he showed no remorse. Even as he stood before the court, he refused to admit guilt. His last words, "This isn't over." But for the families of Regina and John, justice had finally been served. Up next, Elsa Segura, a woman whose horrifying actions left a community in disbelief. Her case highlights the terrifying extremes some can go, and the shocking details that followed her crime.
Your Honor, the defendant, she actually could have been a hero. She could have been a hero. She could have warned Monique.
On December 31st, 2019, a promising young realtor named Monique Baugh left her home to meet a potential client. She was hardworking, caring, and a loving mother of 2 little girls. However, what began as an ordinary appointment quickly spiraled into a horrifying ordeal that would devastate her family. Monique had been contacted several times by a woman named Elsa Segura, who claimed to be interested in buying a home. What Monique didn't know was that Elsa was setting a deadly trap. When Monique arrived at the vacant property, two men, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, kidnapped her. They tied her up with duct tape and forced her into a moving truck. The nightmare didn't end there. The kidnappers drove to Monique's home in Minneapolis. Using her keys, one of them broke in and shot Monique's boyfriend multiple times in front of their two little girls, ages 3 and 1. Despite his serious injuries, he survived and managed to call for help, but Monique was still in danger.
Back in 2019, well, she never showed up to that house. Two of her boyfriend's friends did, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis. Court documents say they put her into a U-Haul.
About an hour later, Monique was taken to an alley in Minneapolis. There, she was shot 3 times and left alone in the cold. The news of her death devastated her family and friends. She was a beloved mother and a rising star in real estate. The crime was cruel, senseless, and heartbreaking. The investigation quickly uncovered the truth. Elsa Segura had lured Monique into the trap using a burner phone, which was bought by her co-defendant Cedric Berry. The police charged 5 people, including Elsa. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Another accomplice, Shantae Berry, received probation for helping them. Elsa Segura's case went to trial, but in 2022 her conviction was overturned by the Minnesota Supreme Court, leading to a retrial. Rather than face another trial, Elsa chose to plead guilty. On this day, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in the crime. The judge agreed to a harsher sentence due to the cruelty of the murder and the involvement of multiple people. However, Elsa showed no guilt for her act.
This time asking Judge Peter Cahill to send Elsa Segura to prison for the rest of her life without the possibility of parole. It was Segura who made the phone calls luring Bao, a local real estate agent.
This case is a painful reminder of how greed and betrayal can lead to tragedy. Monique's family will never get her back, but her memory lives on in the hearts of her loved ones and her 2 daughters. Elsa Segura's sentence holds her accountable, but nothing can erase the pain Monique's family feels.
It's sad that she lost her life for somebody else's decisions in life.
Through it all, the community stands with the Baugh family, hoping they find some peace and justice in the wake of their unimaginable loss. Elsa's story shows how someone she trusted led her into a deadly trap. But as the next case shows, some crimes go beyond recklessness into the realm of calculated violence.
She just a good person. And we miss her.
On August 12, 2016, a heartbreaking crime shook the small community of Afton, Tennessee. The body of 21-year-old Jessie Nicole Morrison was discovered on the side of the road. She had been brutally attacked, and the cause of her death was determined to be blunt force trauma. The tragedy was even greater because Jessie was 4 months pregnant at the time. The investigation started when Gary Ely, who was Jessie's fiancé at the time, lived with her and her 2 sons at the Cross Anchor Trailer Park. On the day of the murder, August 12, 2016, he was at work from 6:30 a.m. until 7:10 p.m., providing a concrete alibi. Additionally, he saw Jessie during his lunch break when she dropped off their shared car and left with Vonda Smith and her 2 sons in Vonda's white Sunfire. Ely was presumed to be the father of Jessie's unborn child. This search for answers left investigators down a path no one expected. As they pieced together the evidence, one name stood out: Vonda Starr Smith, a grandmother from Greene County. The news spread quickly, leaving the community in shock. How could someone known for caring for others be accused of such a horrible crime? Whispers of disbelief filled the town. Neighbors struggled to accept that someone they trusted could be behind such a brutal act. Yet, the evidence pointed directly to Vonda. However, Vonda refused to accept the blame. She insisted she was innocent, claiming the truth had been twisted against her. The courtroom became a battleground, a place where grief, anger, and determination collided. On one side stood the prosecutors, fighting for justice for Jessie and her unborn child. On the other hand, Vonda and her defense team are determined to prove her innocence. Law enforcement worked day and night to uncover the truth. Clue by clue, their investigation led to one person, Vonda Starr Smith. The shocking discovery left everyone in disbelief. Vonda, a grandmother from Greene County, was charged with the murder of Jessie Nicole Morrison and her unborn child. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension. Jessie's family sat with heavy hearts, hoping for justice. However, Vonda was smiling, and hugging her son.
Issued an opinion affirming the judgments of the trial court against Smith.
The prosecution presented the evidence, painting a clear picture of what had happened. Meanwhile, Vonda's defense fought back, but the truth was undeniable. Finally, on May 25, 2018, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on both charges. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced Vonda's punishment: life in prison for Jesse's murder and an additional 25 years for the death of Jesse's unborn child. The news brought a bittersweet feeling. Justice had been served, but it could never bring Jessie back. Her family felt the weight of their loss, knowing they would never see her bright smile again.
She is very relieved that the charges has finally come down and that his arrest has been made, and hoping that in the future that justice will be done.
Though the trial ended, Jessie's memory remained alive in the hearts of those who loved her. Her story became a reminder that every life matters and justice will always have its day. Even after her sentencing, the conflict continued. Smith appealed the ruling, claiming the evidence was insufficient and that her rights had been violated during the trial. She argued that the court failed to provide information about a cell phone signal and made errors during the trial. However, on February 24, 2021, the Court of Criminal Appeals at Knoxville upheld the original ruling. Smith's appeal was denied, and her life sentence remained in place. And as the verdict was read, tears started to shed on her face.
Vonda Smith was found guilty in the death of 21-year-old Jessie Morrison, who was pregnant at the time.
The community felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. Jessie and her unborn child were gone far too soon, but justice had been served. This case reminds us of the pain caused by violent crimes and the importance of holding those responsible accountable. Jessie's story will never be forgotten, and her memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved her.
Her kids were alive, and she lost her life for her kids.
Justice was served for Jessie and her unborn child. And in our next case, another act of deception led to a horrifying kidnapping and murder that shook an entire nation.
This is the house.
Yeah.
This is the porch. This is the driveway.
Okay.
There's a tree line. The driveway is about this wide.
Okay.
We pulled in. This is the house. This would be the back of the house.
Okay.
So this is the porch right here. There's a house part right here.
On a summer night in 2016, an 18-year-old college baseball player, Colton Thomas Shearer, was spending his break at home in Middleburg, Florida. He had a bright future ahead of him, but everything changed when a robbery turned deadly, ending his life in a moment of violence. Colton had been lured to a house on County Road 16A by someone he thought was a friend, Alexandra Grace Schreffler. Unbeknownst to him, she had been approached by three men: Jordan Coleman, Taureen Johnson, and Ozell McNabb Jr., who wanted to find someone to rob. Schreffler chose Colton from her Facebook friends. As the police searched for answers, the heartbreaking truth came to light. Colton had been betrayed by someone he trusted. What started as a meeting between friends quickly turned into a nightmare. The night of the robbery, chaos erupted inside the house. Gunshots echoed through the air, and Colton was critically wounded. His friend, David Cody Levo, was also hurt but managed to escape with another friend, Tyler Bashers. Desperately, they rushed to a nearby gas station for help, but it was too late. Colton's life had already slipped away. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered more crimes linked to the suspects. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb had also broken into a sheriff's deputy's patrol car, stealing weapons that would cause even more harm. But the law caught up with them. All four were arrested, and their plans of greed and violence came to an end. The loss of Colton was devastating, but justice was served for his family. His mother said in court, "I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night."
I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night.
His story remains a reminder of how precious and fragile life truly is. Justice came slowly, but surely. Schreffler, initially charged with murder and armed robbery, struck a deal. She pleaded guilty to armed robbery and agreed to testify against the others. She received 15 years in prison. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb faced harsher punishments, with sentences ranging from 25 to 30 years behind bars. However, she showed no remorse.
Schreffler pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of armed robbery and agreed to testify against her co-defendants.
Colton Shearer had dreams, talent, and a life ahead of him, but a senseless act of greed took it all away. His family and friends were left to mourn his loss, knowing his bright future had been stolen. Justice was served, but no sentence could bring peace to Colton's family. His story is a heartbreaking reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. The next case shows how a ruthless car crash takes an innocent life.
He was amazing, smart, intelligent, helpful. He's an amazing young man.
On October 31st, 2018, in Las Vegas, Nevada, a family's life changed forever. A high-speed DUI crash ended the life of 8-year-old Levi Echenique and left his parents with severe injuries. The driver responsible for the crash was 25-year-old Aylin Alderette. This heartbreaking case shook the community and became a reminder of the deadly consequences of driving under the influence. Aylin Alderette was driving at 103 miles per hour when she crashed into the Echenique family's car at an intersection. Investigators determined that she had been under the influence of alcohol and drugs at the time of the crash. Dashcam and surveillance footage from nearby businesses captured the devastating moment, showing how the impact caused the family's vehicle to spin out of control before coming to a violent stop. Emergency responders arrived at the scene within minutes, but the damage had already been done. Levi was pronounced dead at the hospital, while his parents, Jose and Brigitte, suffered life-threatening injuries. The impact was devastating. Levi's brother Joey shared how deeply the loss affected him, saying, "Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right." The Echenique family and their loved ones wore shirts with the words "Justice for Levi, for the love of Levi," as they stood together in the courtroom seeking justice. During the sentencing, Levi's family shared their pain and heartbreak. His mother, Brigitte, spoke about her unimaginable loss. She recalled waking up from her injuries, believing her sons were safe at school, only to learn that Levi was gone. She said, "My son was 8 and will never age another day." His father, Jose, expressed his sadness, saying, "She stole my baby boy that I will never see again. Her family can still visit her. My baby boy was 8.
Unfortunately, it was my vehicle that she hit. She stole my baby boy. I can never see again."
Alderette sobbed through the hearing, apologizing to the family. She said, "I'm so sorry for the family I hurt. I wish I could return to that horrific day and change everything." Her defense attorney shared that she had faced a difficult life, suffering from mental illness and trauma, but the prosecutor argued that her actions still required accountability. The judge sentenced Aylin Alderette to 26 to 65 years in prison, the maximum sentence for a second-degree murder and 2 counts of DUI causing substantial bodily harm. She was also ordered to pay the family $467,000 in restitution. At the time of sentencing, she breaks down in court after hearing her sentence.
Levi was killed after Aylin Alderette drove with 4 times the legal limit of marijuana in her system and smashed into the Echenique's car.
Levi's older brother Joey said that giving her the maximum sentence was the best birthday present my brother could get. Levi would have turned 9 years old just days after the sentencing.
Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right at all. Like my mom said, the best birthday present that my brother could get.
This case reminds us of how one reckless decision can cause irreversible pain. Levi's family will forever carry the heartbreak of losing their beloved son and brother. Although the sentence cannot bring Levi back, his family found some peace knowing that justice was served. The tragedy stands as a powerful reminder to never drive under the influence and to always consider the safety of others.
Levi's parents say the outpouring of support from the community is a testament to the kind of kid Levi was.
Levi's loss is a stark reminder of how one thoughtless action can destroy lives. However, in the next case, the victim survived the attack, but the physical and emotional scars will never fully heal.
Did you ever tell Jessica that you were pregnant?
Yes, sir. My sister was on top of me, covering my mouth, trying to choke me.
On October 6, 2013, a shocking act of violence shattered a family in Malani Maka when Jessie Heinbaugh and her boyfriend Michael Ayala betrayed someone they should have protected, Jessica's sister, Casey Ann Jones. Casey, who was 2 months pregnant, endured a terrifying attack at the hands of the very people she should have been able to trust the most. The brutal betrayal by her sister and Ayala turned what should have been a bond of love and protection into a horrifying ordeal that would leave lasting scars. That day, Jessica and Michael choked and stabbed Casey, leaving her with serious injuries. However, the physical pain was only part of her suffering. Her greatest fear was for her unborn baby's life. The police launched an immediate investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, which included blood-stained items and a kitchen knife identified as the weapon used in the attack. Investigators also obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera, which captured Michael Ayala arriving and leaving the scene. During police interviews, Casey provided a harrowing account of the attack, describing how Jessica and Michael showed no mercy. Medical reports confirmed multiple stab wounds and bruising consistent with strangulation, supporting Casey's testimony. Authorities charged Jessica Heinbaugh and Michael Ayala with attempted murder, citing clear intent to kill. Prosecutors argued that the brutality of the attack, along with Casey's vulnerable state due to her pregnancy, proved premeditation. The case went to trial, and Jessica did not deny what she had done. She laughs at the time of trial. Her public defender, Darcia Forrester, shared that Jessica had fully accepted her guilt and the punishment that awaited her. She knew there would be no escaping the consequences of her actions, but for Casey, the wounds ran deeper than what anyone could see. The attack stole her peace and happiness during a time that should have been filled with joy and excitement, dreaming about her baby's future. No matter what happened in court, Casey's life would never be the same. During the sentencing, a powerful letter from Casey Ann Jones was read aloud in court. In her heartfelt words, she shared how the attack forever changed her life. It didn't just leave her with physical scars, it stole her peace, her trust, and the joy she had felt about becoming a mother. Casey wrote about how instead of celebrating her pregnancy, she spent her days in fear. She no longer felt safe in her own home. Simple things like locking doors or making sure every knife was in place became part of her daily routine as she tried to protect herself and her unborn child. Through her letter, Casey made it clear that the damage went beyond her injuries. It was something she carried in her heart every day. She wanted the court to know that the actions of Jessica and Michael had taken far more from her than anyone could see.
How did this talk make you feel?
Horrified. I was being attacked by someone I loved and trusted.
She wrote that her daughter suffered the most, growing up in the shadow of an unimaginable crime. She would never meet the people who had caused so much pain, but their actions had forever changed her life. Casey begged the court to ensure that Jessica and Michael never had the chance to harm anyone else again. On Tuesday, Jessica Heinbaugh was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. However, she had no shame for her act. Michael Ayala's sentencing would follow later. For Casey, justice had been served, but the scars of that night would never fully fade. Up next, Catherine Knight, a case so gruesome it shocked even the most hardened investigators. Her crimes pushed the limits of brutality, leaving a lasting mark on true crime history.
1st of March 2000 is etched on the minds of the people of Aberdeen, Australia, forever.
Never before, and really never again, has there been a crime of this nature actually perpetrated by a woman.
A murder so inexplicably heinous, it still affects all of the officers called to the scene to this day.
Nothing could prepare you for what you were about to see.
Aberdeen, New South Wales, a quiet town where crime was rare. But on the 1st of March 2000, a crime so unimaginable unfolded that it would send shockwaves across Australia. When John Price didn't show up for work, his concerned co-workers called the police. Officers arrived at his home, knocking repeatedly. No answer. But what they saw through the window was enough to force entry. Inside, they walked straight into a horror scene straight out of a nightmare. John Price had been in a harmful relationship with Catherine Knight for years. A butcher by trade, a violent woman by nature, Catherine had a deep fascination with knives, violence, and control. Her past relationships were marked with threats, physical harm, and disturbing behavior. In one case, she had held a previous partner at knife point, demanding he take her back. In another, she slit the throat of his puppy as a warning. When Price finally tried to escape her grasp, filing a restraining order after one of her outbursts, he told friends that if he ever went missing, Knight was to blame. Sadly, he was right. On the night of February 29, 2000, Knight arrived at Price's home under the guise of reconciliation. What happened next was pure horror. She waited until he fell asleep, then launched her sadistic attack. Using a butcher knife, Knight stabbed Price 37 times. Deep, savage blows piercing vital organs. The sheer force of the attack sent blood spattering across the walls. But her twisted desires weren't satisfied. With chilling precision, she skinned his entire body, hung the flesh from a meat hook in the living room, and cooked parts of his body. She set 2 plates on the table, each labeled with the names of Price's children, suggesting she planned to feed them their father. It was so gruesome that hardened investigators needed therapy after witnessing the scene. Knight was found in a drugged state, having taken a handful of pills, likely attempting to stage a fake suicide. She was arrested immediately. During questioning, she claimed she remembered nothing, but the evidence was undeniable. Her trial was one of Australia's most infamous, with zero possibility of parole. The judge, horrified by the details, declared she was too dangerous to ever be freed. She became the first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole. In court, Knight showed no emotion, no tears, no remorse, just a chilling blank stare as the crime was laid out in harrowing detail. The family of John Price sat in shock and horror, forced to relive the unimaginable pain of his final moments. While justice was swift, the trauma Knight left behind would never fade. Even behind bars, Knight remains a terrifying enigma. A woman so devoid of empathy that even hardened criminals fear her. She will die in prison, and the world is better off for it. Our next case takes us to the ruthless world of organized crime, where one woman rose to power through murder and cold-blooded executions. But what made her even more terrifying? She didn't even spare her own allies.
She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
Known in cities across the US as the Godmother, for her mafia-like brutality. Gangland warfare has been raging across the city for 3 years.
Miami saw dramatic changes in the homicide rate. We went from probably 80 to 100 murders a year to almost 300 to 400.
In the heart of 1970s Miami, where money flowed like water and violence ruled the streets, one name sent chills through even the most hardened criminals: Griselda Blanco. She wasn't just a lord, she was the queen of retribution, eliminating anyone who stood in her way with ruthless efficiency. But her reign of terror didn't stop at business rivals. Even those closest to her weren't safe. By the time her empire crumbled, Blanco was linked to over 200 murders, including her own husband's, earning her the chilling nickname, the Black Widow. Blanco's criminal roots ran deep. She began her life of crime as a child in Colombia, running scams and kidnappings before diving headfirst into the trade. When she arrived in the US, she quickly dominated Miami's substance market, pioneering new smuggling methods and raking in millions per month. But with power came paranoia. Blanco trusted no one. She ran her operation with an iron fist, ordering brutal executions without hesitation. Drive-by shootings, assassinations in broad daylight. Miami's streets became a war zone under her rule, and law enforcement had had enough. The FBI launched Operation Banshee, an all-out effort to bring Blanco down. In 1985, their patience paid off. Agents arrested Blanco in California, charging her with 3 counts of first-degree murder. But even behind bars, her influence lingered. Authorities feared she was still orchestrating hits from her prison cell. And then came the most shocking twist. While she was serving time, prosecutors discovered evidence linking her to a dozen more killings, including a contract to murder a child over an unpaid drug debt. Despite the mountain of evidence, Blanco struck a plea deal, escaping the death penalty and serving only 7 years before being deported to Colombia. But karma wasn't done with her yet. In 2012, as she left a butcher shop in Medellin, a motorcycle assassin gunned her down, the same execution style she had used on so many of her own enemies. Griselda Blanco's legacy remains one of blood and fear. She wasn't just another cartel boss. She redefined the drug trade, proving that a woman could be just as lethal as any man in the underworld. And yet, in the end, she fell victim to the same world she created. Her story serves as a terrifying reminder that in the world of crime, loyalty is fleeting, and power always comes at a price. Our next case takes us into the twisted world of a woman who played a deadly game of deception. Her charm was a weapon, and her victims never saw the danger until it was too late. This is the story of Sheila Davalloo.
Answer, please. Hello. A guy is attacked my neighbor. You think someone attacked your neighbor? Yes. I heard yelling.
In 2002, a quiet Connecticut neighborhood became the setting for a twisted love triangle that would end in obsession, betrayal, and murder. Sheila Davalloo seemed like an ordinary, intelligent woman, until her deadly fixation on another man led to 2 violent attacks that no one saw coming. Sheila was married, but she had a dangerous obsession with her coworker, Nelson Sessler. The problem? He was already in a relationship with Ana Lisa Raimondo, and Sheila couldn't stand being second choice. For months, she carefully manipulated the situation, trying to sabotage Nelson's relationship. She called Ana Lisa's home, pretended to be other women, and planted rumors at work. But none of it was enough. Nelson remained committed to Annalisa. That's when Sheila decided to eliminate her competition.
It was a crime triggered by a lover's obsession, and it drove the police down a rabbit hole of dead ends and one big, strange twist.
On November 8, 2002, Annalisa was found brutally murdered in her Stamford condo. She had been stabbed multiple times and beaten, her home ransacked to make it look like a robbery. There were no immediate suspects, and the case quickly went cold. Sheila, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened, continuing her affair with Nelson, while still keeping her husband in the dark. But Sheila's thirst for control didn't stop at Annalisa. A year later, in 2003, she turned on her own husband. Sheila convinced Paul Christos to play a blindfolded game, then suddenly stabbed him twice in the chest. He barely survived, escaping and calling 911. While paramedics rushed to save him, Sheila made a shocking move. She called Nelson, not 911, as her husband bled out. That mistake exposed everything. Sheila was arrested for the attack on Paul and sentenced to 25 years, but as investigators dug deeper, they linked her to Annalisa's murder. DNA evidence, phone records, and her history of jealousy sealed her fate. In 2012, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
I'm claiming my innocence.
Not if Sheila Davalu had her way.
But this is a case where I am being accused of killing somebody.
Sheila never showed remorse for her crimes. Even in court, she appeared cold and detached, refusing to take responsibility. Her story remains one of the most chilling cases of obsession turning deadly, where love, jealousy, and deception ended in bloodshed. And the scariest part, if her husband hadn't survived, she might have gotten away with it all. Our next case takes us to a seemingly caring nurse who was trusted with the lives of innocent children. But behind closed doors, she became a silent killer. When authorities uncovered what she had done, it left the entire medical community in shock.
Beverly Allett, a nurse whose mission to kill the youngest and most helpless patients in her care left a nation horrified.
With all eyes anxious for a glimpse of Britain's worst female serial killer,
the former nurse Beverly Allett begins a sentence without end tonight for murdering 4 children in her care and for injuring 9 others. She was given life 13 times over and was told there was no real chance of her ever being free again.
In the early 1900s, Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in England became the center of a terrifying mystery. Babies and young children, previously stable, began suffering sudden, unexplained medical emergencies. Some recovered, but others tragically didn't make it. Doctors were baffled, parents were heartbroken, and no one suspected the friendly pediatric nurse who was always at their bedside, Beverly Allett. Allett presented herself as a dedicated, caring nurse. She consoled grieving parents, reassured doctors, and seemed to be deeply invested in the well-being of her patients. But behind this facade, she was systematically targeting innocent children, injecting them with lethal doses of insulin and potassium, or suffocating them. Between February and April 1991, she attacked 13 children, killing 4 and leaving others permanently disabled. Yet, no one realized what was happening until the pattern emerged. As investigators pieced together the cases, they noticed an unsettling trend. Beverly Allett was present for every single emergency. The hospital launched an internal investigation, uncovering missing medical records and evidence of tampering. Suspicion quickly turned towards Allett, and when forensic testing confirmed that several victims had been deliberately poisoned, she was arrested.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gail Allett of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. In the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence.
Her trial revealed the full horror of her crimes. She had preyed on the most vulnerable, all while pretending to be their protector. The court heard chilling details of her calculated attacks and how she thrived on the chaos and attention they brought. In 1993, Beverly Allett was sentenced to 13 life terms for her crimes, making her one of the worst child killers in British history. She was diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where caregivers harm others to gain sympathy and attention. Instead of prison, she was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital, a psychiatric facility where she remains to this day. Families were left devastated. Parents who had trusted her now had to live with the unbearable truth that the person meant to save their children was the one who took them away. Allitt has never shown true remorse. Even now, as she serves her sentence, there are fears she could one day be released, sparking outrage from the victims' families. She was supposed to heal the sick. Instead, she became one of the most notorious medical killers of all time. Our next case takes us to a woman whose ruthless ambition led her to orchestrate a cold-blooded execution. She didn't act alone. She pulled the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating others to do her dirty work. But when the truth unraveled, her fate was sealed.
And if Christy can hear me, if you can get away someplace, Christy, phone either home or the Niagara Police as soon as possible.
Is wanted for a series of assaults, 2 last May and 1 just last week. And police say his attacks always follow the same pattern.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Canada was gripped by fear as young women were vanishing, only to be found murdered. At the center of it all was Paul Bernardo, a man later exposed as the Scarborough rapist. But he wasn't working alone. His partner in crime? A woman who shocked the world with her cold-hearted participation, Karla Homolka. Karla wasn't just an unwilling accomplice. She was an active participant in the horrific assaults and murders of multiple victims, including her own younger sister, Tammy Homolka. What made this case even more disturbing was how she played the role of the perfect girlfriend and later, the devoted wife. Behind closed doors, she helped lure victims, cover up crimes, and manipulate those around her. By the time the authorities started connecting Bernardo to the violent crimes, Karla crafted an escape plan. She painted herself as a battered woman, claiming she had been a victim of Paul's mistreatment and had no choice but to comply. In 1993, Karla struck a plea deal, known as the Deal with the Devil, where she agreed to testify against Bernardo in exchange for a 12-year sentence for manslaughter. At the time, prosecutors believed her story, but everything changed when new videotapes surfaced. These tapes proved that Karla wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. They showed her laughing and enjoying the harm inflicted on their victims. But it was too late. Her plea deal couldn't be overturned. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but Karla walked free in 2005 after serving her full 12-year sentence. She changed her name, moved, and even started a family, attempting to erase her past. But the public never forgot what she had done. Her attempts to blend into normal life only led to public outrage whenever her whereabouts were discovered. Karla Homolka's early release remains one of Canada's most controversial legal decisions. Victims' families, along with the public, felt betrayed by the justice system. How could someone so involved in such horrifying crimes be allowed to walk free? Even today, she lives under a cloud of suspicion, with many believing she never truly paid for her crimes. Her case serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people don't look like killers, but they are. Some walked in as monsters, others left as broken shells, but every one of them heard a sentence that changed everything. Out of all 54, which one hit you the hardest? Was it the cold smile, the outburst, or the one who said nothing at all? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one.